So it seems like
Yeah, I can talk
it's
for a second.
okay. So we are here at the Ellis Oval on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, covering the Tufts track meet against Trinity College, Wesleyan University, and Connecticut College. I'm joined here by Cougar Hansen. How you doing today, Cougar?
I'm doing fantastic. It is a sunny day. It's pretty warm out compared to the snow that we had a few days back. And I'm
Absolutely.
excited to see some track and field.
It's a great change of pace. So, just to get you all up to speed, our viewers, we are currently in the field phase, if you will, of this meet, starting out with the javelin. It looks like they may have had their first throws. The long jump as well, going on the opposite side of the track, and the shot put. I think going on sort of in the back left corner, if you will, of the track. We will do our best to give you the results as they come in. A little bit difficult to identify some of these athletes, but we will do our best. Um, Cougar, what event are you most looking forward to this afternoon? Whether it's because you just love the event, it just calls to you, or because you are looking at any athletes in particular of interest.
In terms of what I'm looking for, I did run distance track in high school, so definitely the 1500 and the 5000 are both events I'm looking forward to, and also the men's 3K steeple. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to run the steeple, but I always wanted to. So seeing a couple of these athletes, which looks like we have two today, it's going to be a close battle potentially. See who wins that.
Ab-
I'm excited to see all of those events. In terms of field events, I always get excited about the pole vault. It's definitely one of the more interesting events in track, and definitely something that I'm excited to see, along with some of the jumps, just given the potential excitement that you can introduce in a crowd, although we don't have much of a crowd today, given that there are no spectators allowed, so it's just going to be their fellow teammates hyping them up and trying to see what they can do today.
We don't. It looks like the only semblance of a crowd we really have are the athletes up in the bleachers with Wesleyan on the left side of the far bleachers and Trinity College on the right. And I believe we have Connecticut College behind the bleachers, if anyone was curious.
Yeah, I'm definitely very excited to see some of the events today. As you can see, a javelin throw from Wesleyan.
Looked like it. Looked like it. Pretty good throw. Looks like he coming in second at this point.
And javelin is not necessarily my area of expertise, but I do like seeing how colorful the poles are. I feel like all the athletes have to have some element of flair and individuality with some of their throws
Oh,
that you don't
absolutely.
necessarily see in some of the other events.
I like the Rasta stick from the Wesleyan athlete. Um, Nice and colorful. So I am going to do my best job to try to guess who the athletes are. It looks like it looks like Billy Wang has completed his throws and is coming back towards the the Tufts team. We had a Wesleyan athlete, either James Giocaris or Noah Olson, throwing on that last set of throws.
And you should also be able to see some of the shot put and the long jump going on right now, as you see a nice long jump from the Tufts jumper. That looked pretty far to me.
Absolutely. And the goal, I believe, with these long jumps is just really trying to avoid planting that hand, behind where your feet land. Ultimately, I believe it's the furthest spot back on your body that counts for where you're marked. So, always an important rule to remember.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult in college. It seems like you can plan out your run all you want. It take 5, 6, 7 steps to the mark. All of what I believe is 40 feet. I might have just made that up. As we see another Wesleyan jumper here. As I don't see any fouls there from the judges. usually when you have one of these jumping events, you'll have judges that will be able to, and officials that will be able to say if that's a foul. Um, Sometimes they throw up a flag. Sometimes they just will look really angry at you. Um, but we're going to see what they do today.
Always tricky. I mean, these guys are coming in with a real head of steam, and yeah, are not always you know necessarily doing what the judges want. But we've had some nice jumps, so far though.
Yeah, I will argue that your average track and field official is going to be a lot nicer than your average ref in any other sport.
That is true. It's a little, especially when it comes to the running events. There's a little less controversy in a timed event. I will say I would always get in my high school events. I would always get some nasty looks if I forgot to take off my watch just to avoid pacing. I'm sure that's an enforceable rule at the collegiate level as well.
Certainly.
Looks like we're awaiting a jump from a Trinity runner. A nice stretch for his start. And he's off. Good strides. Takes off. Good run. Kicked up a good bit of sand at the end there, but
Looks fair
looks
to
like
me.
he might have been a little disappointed with that one. Kind of putting his fist into his hands, but
Yeah, certainly with the
solid
field
jump.
events, there's a lot of self-evaluation, for lack of a better term. Um, you are obviously competing as part of a team, and you want to get the team to win. But some of these events, you might not necessarily have a lot of partners to train with. So it's a lot of just trying to better yourself.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely hard to imagine that you could really run down the lane with someone and hop into a sand pit at the same time. So you're absolutely right, Cougar, about just sort of the hyper internal focus on a lot of these jumps. And I can say, because he was the only Trinity athlete listed in the long jump set of athletes competing, that last jumper was almost certainly Kennard Hughes. Who is listed as sort of tied for first in terms of seed, with having recorded a 6.75 meter jump as his seed mark.
As you saw, another shot put from the back. And here we have another Tufts long jump.
Good jump. See, that's that kind of lean forward you want to see. That the Tufts jumper executed super well.
I've always wondered when you're in the air, what are the things that you can do to help you fly a little farther? Obviously you want to extend your legs as far as you can when you're trying to jump. But sometimes you end up flailing, and I always wonder if you got a little bit of lift there, although that may be some.
Yeah, I almost imagine the flags, and we got to jump here.
Yeah.
Another one, yeah. You had this athlete had his legs extended. Definitely got a good bit of lift because of it. But it is tricky to understand actually what the best form really is, because it seems like so many of these athletes have a different form. So I guess the results come out on what's best form when you see how they did in the event. We have some more jav action. A recent throw by, I believe, one of the Wesleyan throwers. Looks like we'll have another Tufts thrower tossing in a sec. Might be Nick Carnes.
Yeah, and some of the more repeatable events, where you were essentially just doing and practicing the same action over and over and over again. It's a lot easier to define your motion, but you can also get into a certain funk, where you just end up having a very awkward form just because it works. But obviously these guys are in college. They have a little more practice than your average high school runner, or jump or thrower.
So Nick has a nice toss. Has the judge running back, and the jury is still out, if you will, on on really how exactly Nick stacks up in this field. He does not have a recorded seed mark for the jav throw, and so we'll see what kind of results he has. And being only a sophomore, having not obviously had really any sort of well, I guess with the exception of maybe his winter season, freshman year, he has not had much in the way of competition during his collegiate career so far. So we have a bit of a weaker toss from the Connecticut College thrower.
Yeah, with some of these events, you might have a wider range of potential competitors. For some of these guys, they were at the top in their state and decided to come to a D3 school for academics. Not that D1 schools can't also have academics, but you definitely have a wider range of potential competition here.
Definitely, particularly in these regular season meets, where they're a little more open, if you will. The qualifying isn't really as present as you see in the conference, New England regional, and obviously national championship meets that will occur as we get into the month of May.
Yeah, but this Tufts team I think is looking pretty good this year. Back in 2019, when we still had track and field, they were second at the NESCAC championships and tied for 64th at the NCAA championships. So they're definitely looking to compete in the NESCAC. They are technically currently the strongest team in the NESCAC, but there were only 2 teams before today who were able to compete fully. Likewise, that makes Wesleyan, I believe, the second best team, but also the worst team. Or Connecticut College, excuse me.
Keep an eye out for our very own Jumbo, Billy Wang, the top seed in the Javelin throw.
As you might have been able to hear, that is Billy Wang, our top seed today, the Jumbo himself.
Still can't quite locate him. I believe the Tufts jav thrower who is set to throw in a sec might still be Nick. I'm just kind of going off of my understanding of these athletes' appearances. Perhaps Billy's day of throwing is already done, or has yet to start. Looks like he might actually be getting wrapped up over by the athletic area.
Yeah, Billy Wang comes in with a 47.95 meter seed mark, which is a little over 2 meters above the previous seed of the 2 Wesleyan throwers at 45 and 43 respectively. So we are looking for him to win this event today, but it will be interesting to see if there's going to be any competition for him. As it looks like there are a couple different tiers here of potential javelin throwers.
Absolutely, and when we rattle off a lot of these seed and marks that these athletes are listed as having, generally they're I believe they're personal best marks. So, in the case of, as Cougar mentioned, in the case of Billy, that would be 47.95 meters, and it looks like he is in fact making his way across the infield back towards the jav area. So perhaps whatever was ailing him with his right arm has been resolved, or he's gonna just try to throw with that injury. But I guess focusing our attention back towards the long jump area, we have another Tufts athlete who's about to go. Again, we apologize for not being able to name names here. It's a little bit difficult without any sort of marking as far as who these athletes are, and obviously the distance we have between us and them.
Yeah. As said earlier, the big competition today is for the 2 people tied with the top seed coming to today, Matthew Montega and Kennard Hughes from Trinity, with Matthew coming in from Tufts. So it's going to be interesting to see that school-on-school rivalry. But a lot of these athletes have missed here. Obviously, we didn't have a real track season in 2020, so a lot of these potential seeds or just the athletes' PRs in general have come from potential time trials or previous events that were in 2019 that may not be accurate now. And I'm sure a lot of these athletes are just bursting at the seams to run and jump and throw today, or pole vault.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible. Even when the training really just happens on their own, and we see a long jump athlete here. Pretty good jump. A nice little slide to the side on the finish. Now, with a lot of these athletes, I mean, you see incredible strength and speed, endurance development, as they age, as they get into their 20s. So even just, a couple of years having not had really those legitimate times that can turn into seed times really definitely can distort our perceptions and also their actual seed times as far as what they're capable of. So we might see some surprises, ultimately, as far as how some of these athletes are seeded versus how they perform.
Yeah, as perhaps in the background you can see some of the distance athletes and some of the sprinters starting to warm up here. I remember when I used to have a warm up back in my short-lived track career in high school. We always used to have some interesting warm-up routines, our own little things. At one point, I think I saw something that Michael Phelps did in the Olympics, and I was like, I should do that. I don't know if really slapping myself really helped, but I'd like to think it did.
Yeah, I see it. I definitely saw it a lot myself, having run some middle and long distance in high school. Some thigh slaps would, I think, mentally to some extent, or most for the most part, as opposed to physically, would be a nice way to get yourself jacked up. So. And as Cougar was mentioning, the athletes seemingly warming up for the 100-meter. That will be our first track event coming up here at 3 p.m. The 100-meter dash preliminaries, and then the finals will be towards the middle of the meet at 4:05.
Yeah, I think Max and I are probably more excited for some of the track events, given that's more of our specialty.
Absolutely.
But you never want to count out the field events, for sure.
Especially from a point standpoint, they definitely can make the difference. And, as we mentioned before, with Tufts' success, NESCAC championships a couple of years ago, finishing second. Obviously, it's the team's goal to repeat that kind of success, and really, it's they're ultimately seeing a lot of these schools repeatedly. I believe that really they're not having meets outside of with teams outside of these three for their entire season. Perhaps it's for COVID reasons, just convenience reasons, but that is apparently how it's been set up this year.
Yeah, for some of these schools, the first time they might face the rest of the conference might be at the NESCAC championships pretty late in the season. So just getting this competition at all, I think everybody's going to be thankful for it. And just be glad that they're out here running and jumping and throwing and pole vaulting.
Absolutely. So just to give a preview of what lies ahead for the Jumbos, next Saturday they will be with the same set of three schools, but visiting Trinity College in Connecticut. And then the following week, the same set of three schools, it seems like at Connecticut College, or actually no, it looks like it'll be another home meet. And then the following week on May 8th is the Tufts Invitational with schools that are not listed on the calendar here. And then they'll finally get into competing against other NESCAC schools with a meet at Williams and Middlebury joining as well on May 15th. So you're absolutely right, Cougar. I mean, for the main schools, Bowdoin, Colby, Bates, in addition to Amherst, and I might be forgetting one or two others. I think Hamilton would be part of that missing group. Will be teams they don't face until they get to some of those championship events, which should make on top of the time delay. Since they faced a lot of those athletes, it'll make for some interesting competition. Probably a lot of feeling out in those races, particularly the distance ones.
Certainly. I mean, in events where you have a little more clear of a potential winner in seed time, such as the Javelin, where you have a top 2 or 3, It's going to be interesting to see if certain athletes can rise above to the competition and are able to compete with the other people in the NESCACs, or whether they stay at their same level. As we see another potential shot put from a Tufts athlete. Yeah, I always wanted to do the shot put, but I have what might be described as a distance body that probably wouldn't do too well in a throwing event. But it really just looks so fun.
I agree. I think it's the most, to some extent, I think it's the most translatable gym to sport competition you really have. I mean, in the gym, like we talked about in my principles of physical education class. I mean, it's like the quintessential horizontal vertical push movement, and explosive at that. So it's cool to see these athletes kind of putting their work in the gym. Certainly, that's been a little more challenging to have over the past since the pandemic began. Seeing that put into practice is exciting for them to be back doing that. We see another Tufts athlete with a spin and a toss. A good throw.
That looked pretty good to me. Yeah, certainly. Just getting access to facilities has been difficult for some of these athletes. I know Tufts has closed some of the facilities over the pandemic. So, if you're a thrower, it's hard to just find your own equipment to push. I know some of the sports teams, other than track, but also including track, had a DIY equipment kind of lift, where it was essentially just lift whatever heavy object you can, and then create obstacle course in your backyard with old tires, and just try and work out any way you can. Obviously, for the distance athlete, it's a little easier. You can just run around wherever. But obviously, for throws and pole vault, it's not like you can really pole vault in your bedroom. Like
that
you
is
can
true.
For other athletes.
That is true. You can kind of maybe grab a PVC pipe or something and try to pole vault over your bed. But obviously, even that doesn't really have the same bending ability as a pole vault stick. But on that topic, we do see some of the pole vaulters warming up. It's always curious to me that, because it makes sense just trying to build up to that height. But at first, you see them not clearing the bar, and you think there must be something wrong. But obviously, for the warm up, they're just trying to build up to that height. So we got a bit of a lull here, it looks like, in terms of the competition. We got some of the some of the jav throwers grouped up, maybe awaiting the results of their event.
Yeah, I remember some of my favorite parts of track were just in spots where I wasn't running. Maybe that's why I'm not in college running, but maybe that's another story for another time. And getting to talk to the other competitors from the other schools, since especially during the pandemic, it's not like you can really drive to other schools and meet people there. So getting to meet new people and just talk throws, talk about how your day is going, talk about any potential issues that you've been having, that other runners or other jumpers, the throwers, might be able to deal with too. It's just nice to have that kind of cross-sport camaraderie.
Absolutely. And for me, the biggest symbol of that, at least from my experience running in high school, but certainly it seems to be apparent here, is the famous tents for the schools. Obviously, less important from a shading and cooling standpoint on an overcast day that's only in the high 50s, but certainly a great spot to for athletes to group up, and also, like you said, Cougar, have that cross school exchange that is really nice, especially in times of more social isolation, like during this pandemic.
Yeah, I remember we used to have I had a coach in high school who, whenever we got off the bus at a meet, would make some of the sprinters just run with the 10 as fast as they could to try and get the key spots. And it was a weirdly competitive soon to see how it was reflected in the actual races. But I think track and field as sports, or as one sport rather, are some of the, I want to say they're some of the nicest competitors. Other sports may disagree, but I think you have a certain camaraderie that you wouldn't in other sports. Football is very like my team versus your team. Soccer, basketball, volleyball, that kind of thing is very like us versus them. But track, you have a certain camaraderie because you're all kind of doing this together, especially for some of the distance events. You're like, oh, we all are in pain right now. It's a very like together kind of event that you're not necessarily feeling like you're competing. But a lot of the schools are competing. There's definitely rivalries, um, both in other sports, but especially in track, between schools where if you get extra points for your team, that could lead to your team winning the meet, and obviously that's the goal.
It's big. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it shall direct our attention towards the long run-up that this Wesleyan jav thrower is about to take. It's a nice toss, good angle, and a solid plant. Gets the judge running out a little bit.
Yeah, the launch angle is certainly something that's important in javelin. Obviously, according to physics, you want to have a nice launch angle, which I believe is around 45 degrees, to have a perfect launch angle for whatever you're throwing. And so getting that correct is the result of many, many attempts at throws. Obviously, you can't go, just like in the long jump, you cannot go and give it a foot fault and step onto the grass. So obviously the athletes are also trying to watch out for that. But here, again, you see a longer backup and running intro for this Wesleyan athlete.
You see the run-up. And we don't quite get that ideal launch angle like you mentioned, Cougar. I imagine, putting on my novice physics cap for a second, I imagine when the stick, if you will, when the pull is a little more vertical, you see some of that wind maybe knocking it back a little bit farther back than you'd expect if it were at a more 45-degree angle.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And not much to report from a long jump standpoint. Perhaps that event has wrapped up. Love to know the results as they come out. And over at shot put, it looks pretty empty as well. So looks like we may have a bit of a break in the action, other than the running clock counting up for no apparent reason. But it looks like we should have Tufts standout, Billy Wang, or Nick Carnes. Looks like it'll be Nick first. Up next in the jav, giving a nice good karaoke before his throw. Perhaps his last one of the day. We'll see. Balances himself. Has the run up. Toss is quite good.
Wow.
Definitely outdoing the previous two competitors.
He looks pretty satisfied with that one.
Yeah.
As you can hear some of the fans yelling, or maybe a singular fan yelling in support. For the little amount of fans that actually can come, given that it's mostly teammates and people watching from outside of the fence, it is great to see some support for some of these teammates, especially for the Jumbos here.
Absolutely. The cheers and support by these athletes' teammates becomes even more important without fans coming up to these meets. So it's nice to see that. Nice to see that we're hearing them vocalize. So you have a Connecticut College thrower with a shorter toss, and interestingly, less of a run up. Curious to know how that might have affected the distance of his throw.
If I'd have to guess, backing up farther means that you have more time to run up and increase your speed, which would likely give you a longer throw. But I guess each athlete probably has their own system of trying to, of how they throw. And so deciding your preferred run-up distance. I believe most athletes do it somewhere on the track at the end, somewhere around halfway between where you can see that opening in the fence versus where the track ends and where the steeple things is. As we see another throw here from a Wesleyan athlete.
And a decent toss. It seems like it places it somewhere between the Connecticut College thrower, and Nick Carnes from Tufts. And it looks like Nick will give it another shot. Now, if it's anything like high school, I seem to remember there is some number of throws within a time window that the athlete can choose to throw, but it is sort of their choice as far as when they do throw. So that's sort of a game within a game too, just trying to gauge your energy level, your willing or your desire to throw a certain number of times. That can ultimately be a strategic way to maybe eke out another good throw or to know when to stop, because your throws are just going to get worse and perhaps you're at risk of
Certainly.
injuring yourself.
I believe it's 3 throws. So we see another Wesleyan throw. That's a little farther from the previous one you just saw.
Had a nice arc. Oh, cool. Were you mentioning that there is some limit to the number of throws, or did you know the limit?
Well, I know that the other events typically have a limit of 3
Okay.
jumps. It's typically 3 jumps. Pole vault, you get 3 chances to get over a certain height. Throws, I believe it's also 3. So I was just extrapolating that based on the other events. There would be 3 possible.
Could be. Perhaps you viewers would know better than us, particularly the families of these javelin throwers. But we'll forge on ahead and try to keep guessing about this event. Saw a bit of a stutter step from Nick there. Worked well for him. A pretty nice toss. A little over to the left from where we've been seeing him locate.
If I was doing the javelin, I would certainly be worried about going over into the grass, and then therefore just qualifying my throw.
Something to avoid, absolutely.
Yeah, so I believe the stutter step is a way to prevent that, because obviously you are going from what is essentially a sprint to stopping in about a few feet. So doing that's difficult, especially if you want to maximize your potential speed. So one thing they try and do is, you'll see this on the hammer throw, I believe also, is just spin around a little bit. As we see a stop there as the javelin does not actually go in the ground.
And the Connecticut College athlete looking a little bit tired after that one. Perhaps we're getting to the latter throws, seeing that some of the throwers might be starting to get a bit tired.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. You're putting in a large amount of effort with these throws in just a few minutes.
Absolutely. We have a long jump competitor from Wesleyan, liftoff. You see his butt going into the ground there, something that obviously, limits his distance a bit, but I guess it's a cushiony fall now.
Certainly. With the long jump, the key is to have your feet touch the ground, and then just kind of walk or stumble, rather, I guess you mean more apt description, forward, and try to prevent your butt from touching the ground and limiting the amount of distance you get on your jump, especially because every inch counts here. It's not like you get a lot of them. You're only in that sand pit. As you can see, a Tufts athlete demonstrate that pretty well, and just keep that body moving forward rather than falling back.
It's important even in the air. I mean, to put yourself in the position to to eke out those last few inches by whatever it is, doing some strategic flailing or whatever will help you make up those extra couple of inches.
Yeah, actually, the women's NCAA long jump was broken about a month ago. The long jump record, for the NCAA by Tara Davis.
Was that at the Division I or Division III level?
That was a Division I level. But it's very exciting to see a record broken in a normal event. And so getting to see that happen was definitely an entertaining sight on social media.
Absolutely. Always exciting. You have a Wesleyan throw that takes a good angle. Seems like about, I wish I could give you distances, but that seems like about around where he has been tossing it. And I'm going to have to guess that Billy is taking himself out of this event, having seen Nick and the other athletes make 5+ throws at this point. I would guess that since we have not seen Billy take one, if at all, certainly not in a while, it would mean that he has pulled himself due to that. It looked like a right forearm injury.
Yeah, sometimes coming back into these events after not doing it for a while, you can have a certain level of not being ready isn't quite the correct terminology. If you see a far throw there,
it's like perhaps his longest of the day.
Obviously, you can warm up as much as you want, but getting competition ready and simulating a real competition may be difficult. And some athletes might not necessarily be used to that and could lead to injuries pretty early on in the season.
Absolutely. And particularly with these dual, tri, quad meets, the regular season meets, if Billy feels confident in his seed mark, as far as it giving him a good seed, a good position, and some of the more important, some of the championship meets, then he probably sees little reason to push it. If he feels like he's just going to jeopardize those performances later on in the season.
Starting at 3 p.m. in 20 minutes, starting with the 100-meter dash at 3 and the 3,000-meter steeplechase at 3:10 p.m.
And with that announcement there, we are eagerly awaiting in just 20 minutes the start of our track events, starting with that 100-meter, and then moving on to the 2,000-meter steeplechase. And we see in the back the utility truck setting up the pads into which the water will go for the steeplechase, an important ritual before the what's in my opinion the most unique track event.
Yeah, I think part of the uniqueness is you combine multiple disciplines. You have the running, obviously, with about 3,000 meters, which is a little less than 2 miles for our American fans. And then you have the jumping, as you have to jump over 5 hurdles, I believe. Yes, given that you have the 4 plus the 5th one with the water jump. And then you also have the swimming, combining another sport. I guess it's not really swimming. You're kind of just waddling out of the water if you're doing it poorly, and then running out of the water if you're doing it well. But I think it's one of the most entertaining events to watch. For example, and I believe it might have been 2019 or 2020, the men's D1 steeple race had what looked like a pretty clear winner going into the water jump at the last lap. And then he fell. So a Stanford runner from San Diego actually surpassed him. And then the Stanford runner fell on that last steeple and then had like a 5-way tie going in, or almost tie going into the finish. So you just have events like that just cause a lot of chaos and a lot of entertainment for the fans that get to watch the race.
Absolutely. I think, it's interesting when at any given steeple jump you can have someone stumble. And you have to imagine as the athletes tire just before those last 200 meters, it's a little bit more likely that you see that stumble, and it comes at a costly time when, if they're the leader and going strong, it can be the result that ultimately evens out the field, like in the case that you mentioned, Cougar. Always something to look out for.
As you heard, Ben Stein on the previous long jump.
And it looks like we are done for the day with Javelin. I would be hard-pressed to see any other athlete having done better than Nick Carnes based off of what we saw. So I will unofficially declare him our winner for the day, and we will be sure to relay that the distance on his throw as it comes out.
And we will let you know, obviously, who is the winner on that event.
So, as by way of a quick recap or just a quick analysis of the Jav, it seems like Billy Wang or not, Tufts can hold its own. It seems like Nick, presumably in one of his first Jav throws, being only a sophomore, has certainly his first one. One of his first ones for the spring season, has come out strong and shows that the Jumbos are deep in those Jav throwers.
All right, quick reminder that at 3 o'clock in 15
And
minutes,
again, we have a 15-minute warning for the track events starting. with the 100-meter run, and then the 3K steeple after that. If you want to get a snack or some water or something before we start tuning in.
We just saw Kinnard Hughes on that last long jump. Very nice looking one. Frankly, one of the cleaner ones I've seen. For me, it's always evidenced by seeing them kind of pop out of the hole real fast. For him, it almost looked like a somersault, but I think he just kind of twisted his legs, popped back up, and it shows that, you know, with that compact body, he didn't have any limbs dragging his mark back. So good to see for the Trinity jumper.
And then a reminder after that, in terms of the field events, you'll be seeing the pole vault on your right side. Some of those pole vaulters are still warming up, along with the triple in the jumps lane, straight ahead in the middle of the field, and then the hammer throw, one of my personal favorite field events, just due to the entertainment of throwing a hammer. Not, of course, a limbal hammer, but a different type of weight, I believe, on the right side in the back.
We will bring that to you as it comes. And I'm curious to know if, it seems like it won't be the case, but part of me was wondering if they're going to leave the steeples out for the 100 meter. Looks like they're only are going to be in each heat for the 100. Only 5 runners, so presumably they could use lanes 4 through 8. And then have 1 through 3 occupied by the steeplechase, but I guess that would be a bit distracting for those sprinters to be running alongside a hurdle that could nip one of the closer ones in their hip.
Yeah, I don't think they want to necessarily turn it into a 100-meter hurdle by accident, but yeah. I definitely have seen a few of the accidental hurdles or track incidents where runners have gotten scared they're going to hit something. Maybe my sophomore, junior year of high school, we had a power issue where the power went out at the meet. So they had to place a wire to make sure the timing worked, just over like the finish line. And it was maybe in the like 7 to 8 foot range. You weren't going to hit it unless you were, you know, an NBA player, and none of us were. So it wasn't really an issue, but it looked like when you were sprinting at it, that you were about to run into it. And we had a kid who was finishing the 200, and then he was kind of looking down, and then he got maybe 10 meters from the finish, thought he was going to hit it, and then just absolutely face-planted to try and not hit it. This is about a mile, but yeah, sometimes those events on the track can get a little dangerous.
Absolutely, sort of like he was trying to dive into the end zone for a touchdown. Which, you know, can have its own advantage if you're neck and neck with someone in a sprint, but certainly makes injury a lot more likely.
Certainly, yeah. And I think injuries are something that this Jumbo's team, at least that we are aware of, has been able to relatively avoid. It looks like most of the athletes on the roster are competing today, or at least helping out. It's hard given the pandemic to try and maintain shape, but I think given the lack of real competition, you have less likely for traumatic injuries to occur, or overuse injuries, especially given that sometimes the training would be stopped. But that could also not be to your advantage. For example, you know, if your team shut down your facilities for weeks due to COVID, and then you would come back and just do everything from scratch, getting those muscles warmed up might be a little more difficult.
Absolutely. I think you likely saw perhaps an imbalance in terms of the endurance versus strength training, particularly for those distance runners, where obviously it's very easy just to go out for that long run, but when it comes to hitting the gym, when gyms were not quite as open, being able to, you know, really keep that muscle stability and strength that, you know, even for people who run, you know, the 10,000 meter is useful because there's a ton of wear and tear, and obviously, you know, anatomically those muscles should be a little more limber to carry you for, let's say, over 6 miles in a race. But you know, having muscle instability can definitely, from a lack of resistance training, let's say, can definitely make those injuries a bit more likely.
I remember But sometimes during the winter, we had a small school with a less than fully dedicated track program at times. So they were kids, who wouldn't run all winter, and they'd come back first day of spring and get ready to run, and immediately get some kind of shin splints or a calf injury or a hamstring injury, and just be like, well, I didn't run all winter. So definitely getting that kind of training. Obviously, that happens in college. They are training year-round, 6, 7, 5 days a week. So you see that from a little less. But just getting to run for a while in real competition, maybe a potential shock to the system. But these are also college athletes. A lot of them have been through it before, or at least have had some kind of competition, at least in high school. So they're potentially a little more experienced.
Certainly. You might have seen some of this I didn't run in the winter syndrome this year, in the sense that I believe that there was not a winter track season. So while the resources are definitely very prevalent, as it seems, opposed to your high school cougar, as far as having the gym open, certainly a large group of athletes motivated and willing to run even during the off season. Perhaps the head wasn't quite as in the game, if you will, without having that steady competition. As far as getting pushed a little bit longer to keep peak or near peak form. Even through the off season. As it is, though, it's really tough to do what I said, keep peak form really for that long. So, frankly, it might have been a nice opportunity for these athletes to kind of gear up for what their peak is going to be, perhaps in a month's time in this spring season, by having what was even longer of an off season, if you will, during the winter. And I mean, I just say the winter, really all of the months over the past year that have been with a lack of competition, and just focus on getting prepared for this moment, where fortunately spring sports have been able to happen, and hopefully that will continue through championship season for some of these top athletes.
Certainly. Obviously I'm from California, and one of the things that I think California track might struggle with compared to East Coast sports is we don't really have a winter season. Both that is because California arguably doesn't have a winter season generally, but we don't have the same kind of indoor season that East Coast schools might have. So I definitely understand not really racing from the end of cross country, or if you're a track athlete, from the end of track season to the beginning of track season. I think that might have been, a simulation of what it's like in California high school competition. But this is college, so that's a little more expected for a lot of these athletes that might not have had a season off for their entire high school career.
No, it is curious to me that California does not have winter track season. I guess maybe honing in your inner Russell Westbrook running up and down a basketball court during the winter sports season might be just that way to keep shape and do some cross training. But for a state that is so rich in athletes across all sports, notably football, basketball, it is surprising that the track athletes don't have as much of an opportunity to compete at peak performance. But certainly with the number of talented Californian runners we see, it must not be that much of a drag.
Certainly, yeah. In terms of coverage plan for what you're going to see today, we are most likely going to cover the track events as they happen, such as the 100, and then update you guys on the field events as news comes in, or as we're able to see them.
Sounds like a great plan, and but yes, as we stand here for the next 5-10 minutes, we will just be kind of chewing the fat, talking about.
Please check in on the infield. 3,000 meters steeplechase. Please check in on the infield. Your events will begin at 3:10.
Just be sitting here talking about what we expect. So I guess by way of preview, we can talk about the seeds for the 100 meter. So in the first meet, in the first heat, we have Jack Clohissy from Tufts, whose seed time puts him at He actually does not have a time, and just it looks like he does not even appear on the roster. So perhaps he is a walk on, or is just new to the team.
Yeah, it definitely can be great to see some of these walk-ons really excel in college. That's definitely easier at the D3 level um, to potentially walk on to a team. I know when I was playing college, I definitely considered seeing if I could walk on and to any schools, and I really couldn't. I wasn't necessarily a great athlete in high school. Um, but it's definitely great seeing those kind of success stories. We have one in JumboCast who's now on the baseball team who walked on successfully. Um, and it is great to see that kind of success. As the next runner in the 100-meter dash right next to Cloyce, would be Kyle Roshkinish from Wesleyan, who has a seed time of 11.5, so roughly midway through the field, tied with Ian McClear for Conn College.
Thank you for covering Kyle there, and our next, and I thought this name looked familiar. So the next runner we'll cover in this first 100-meter heat is actually the first cross athlete we're going to see, or I should say, two-sport athlete, Devonte Reed, whose name I thought I recognized because the last time I was in this booth here, it was in a different season. It was in fall, covering football between Tufts and Trinity, and actually watching Devonte play, who hails from London, England, and is a junior, plays football, and is believe is a wide receiver. And yeah, is just another one of these athletes who runs as well, an easy and logical crossover for someone who, presumably has a lot of speed like Devonte to run in the 100-meter as well.
Did you say he's a football player from England?
He is, yes.
I didn't.
Originally, I think he went to high school in New York. He went to Archbishop Stepinac, but was born in London.
Yeah, I mean, you do see a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there's an increase of American football over in England. Usually they're famous for the other type of football, of course, but there is some American football given that some NFL teams are attempting to, or, before COVID would play their games there. The Jaguars obviously being one team who are known for playing some of their games overseas. And creating kind of fan base over there that's, interesting to see.
Absolutely. And I know back, I want to say in the 90s, before my time, the NFL had an initiative called NFL Europe that may have, I will look into this as we speak, but may have had some touch in England.
Yeah, but our next runner, O.J. Armstrong, is on the football team for Tufts. One of our better wide receivers, if I remember correctly. So you just have that cross-sport connection. Obviously, certain athletes who are now in the NFL, including, I believe, Tyreek Hill, who was a very good runner in high school, along with, and it might have been RG3, who ran in high school. So Tyreek Hill, the star wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs now, ran the 200 in 20.14 seconds, which was the second fastest high school mark of all time. So I think he could have had a pretty good crack career, but ended up having a great career in the NFL instead, which I don't really blame him for. But
absolutely,
yeah, it's great to see that cross-sport connection.
Pretty crazy to think that you can be so talented in two different sports, but certainly the overlap is quite obvious.
The 100-meter dash is starting soon.
As we get ready for our 100-meter track, I think the highest seed coming in is going to be O.J. Armstrong, pretty significantly by about 0.26 seconds. So we are going to look and see him potentially win. In terms of the who ends up at the finals, you were looking for the heat winners, so whoever wins each race, plus the fastest time up to 8 people. There look like there's going to be 11 people total, which makes 3 people cut off. So it is the race
Getting set here.
here to not be the 3 slowest.
So the athletes get down in their positions. And are off. We have OJ leading, I believe, with a Trinity runner. Looks like perhaps Devontae Reed in second. And OJ Armstrong is our winner.
Tufts University in the 100-meter dash.
So we go Tufts, Trinity Tufts.
We'll keep an eye out for that time, but that looked like a strong performance.
So I was actually mistaken. I was not sure of Jack Clohissy's typical events because he's listed as a hurdles and multis runner. So stands to reason that this was his first 100, but comes with some success. It looks like he finished in third with Devontae Reed in second and OJ Armstrong in first. What did you see of note in that heat, Cougar?
I mean, I think we saw what we expected. OJ Armstrong with a fairly dominating performance over the rest of the field. Obviously, we thought he was going to win, given his scene time was a little faster than everybody else's. But we also saw Devontae Reed perhaps putting up a performance of his own and almost keeping up with Armstrong, which I don't think we necessarily expected to be as close as it was. And then Jack Closey also coming close in a third, which is great to see from some of these multi-runners for people who do multiple events. It is great to see them translate some of the success. I know my high school had some people who were pretty great in the field and also could throw down a pretty fast 100-meter time. As the second heat is about to get ready.
And I think Reed did benefit from having OJ set the pace in the sense that he was only seeded 6th of all the 100-meter runners, but kept up pretty close. I think the gap between him and Armstrong was definitely smaller than Reed and Clohissy. So we'll see how they do battle in the final later on this afternoon.
Reminder that 100-meter final, we don't have an exact time for you, but it will be after the 110-meter hurdles and right before the 800 as the 6th event of the day.
So the runners are lined up for this second heat. And I'll give you a rundown of those in it. We have Faiz Aladdin from Connecticut College, Christian Denny from Wesleyan, I believe in the middle, Billy Florima, also from Connecticut College, Sebastian Cox from CC, and the sole Tufts runner, Gunnar Fisher, believe in the far lane. And they're off. It looks like Denny is in the lead, going strong with a Connecticut College runner in second. Denny really just with insane burst finishes as the winner. So we go Wesleyan, Connecticut College, Tufts. So wish I could give you the names of who came in second versus third, but those were the orders of the schools here.
Yeah, Denny was the second seed, the person behind OJ Armstrong. Obviously, the seeds, for those who don't know, are your expected times, roughly, to help determine the fairness and the relative strength of the heats. And so it's definitely going to be fun to watch in the finals here later on today. I'd guess they're going to be about 4:30, somewhere in that range. As, again, Denny takes the win here in our second event, or in our first event, rather, which is going to be followed by the 3K steeple. I'm certainly excited to see this. We don't necessarily have a ton of runners here. The steeple is sometimes hard to get runners from, given that you have to have a certain particular set of skills that mostly involve successful distance running along with hurdles. Usually the hurdlers are short distance given that you have the 110 hurdles for the men, and then the 400 hurdles also, which are sprint events. But then you have a distance event where you have to have some level of hurdling ability that you're able to keep over a little less than 2 miles.
Absolutely. And for those who are familiar with high school track distances, the longest distance you see in those events is 3,200 meters, and the idea is that this 3,000 meter is meant to sort of simulate that that length of time. So for those with that concept of time in their mind, that is basically the translation. So we will get started with that in just a few minutes.
Max, did you have a favorite track event in high school?
Ooh. It's one I really wish I had ran in more, which is the 800 meter. And the way I was describing it to our crew earlier is it's really the first race where you have to incorporate some element of pacing. You can kind of get away with an all-out sprint in the 100, 200, 400 meters. Obviously, in the 400 meters, you get pretty gassed by the end. But in the 800, while there is this desire really to come out hot, oftentimes it can come back to bite a lot of those runners if they don't leave enough gas in the tank for really those last, let's say, 300 meters when you really should be kicking. What about you, Cougar? Favorite event?
I was a 2-mile guy, so running the 3,200 meters was my favorite. And I always felt like ripping the Band-Aid off slowly. That's the best way I can describe it.
Absolutely.
Slowly, but also painfully. I always hated the 800. It felt way too fast for me, and I didn't quite have the legs for it. It felt like I was just dying the entire time versus the 2-mile where I could rip it off slowly and only feel like I was really dying for the last couple laps.
The LGBTQ+ community has struggled to be accepted and welcomed by those around them. Today, we strive to create a community that embraces, accepts, and includes everyone regardless of their sexual preference or gender identity.
And you just heard here an announcement of the dedication of this meet to Pride with, as you can see here, the Tufts, really all the Tufts athletes today, but from those you can see right now, the ones in the infield donning the shirts. Nice to see this team supporting such a good cause.
Absolutely. Some of the other Tufts sports have their own causes. For example, Tufts softball, I believe, is picking a new cause every game or every weekend to support. For example, they did MS last weekend. And my apologies, I do not know what their cause is this weekend. But looking on the Tufts website will certainly help you try and donate if you feel so kind to some of these important causes.
Absolutely, and I know our lovely PA announcers were mentioning earlier that for track and field in particular, for causes related to Pride, you can look on their
Please get ready
website.
to check into the infield for the 4x100 meter relay. Relay teams, please be ready to check in for the 4x100 meter relay, which will be ran at 3:25 p.m. Thank you.
As I was mentioning, you can actually go onto the track and field Facebook page to find your opportunity to donate.
Certainly, if you feel like you want to help, donating would be much appreciated by both the track and field teams, but also from JumboCast as a club.
Absolutely. So we have the laps tracker set up, the timer looking close to ready to go. So it looks like the runners, I would imagine they probably would be starting in the far right corner from our vantage point so that they finish at the finish line. Actually, no, I imagine they would probably, well, we'll have to see.
I think they're going to start roughly in the top left corner and finish on the right, if I had to guess.
That is what I would guess.
But you should see that start in a couple minutes. We only have 4 athletes, I believe, entered into this race today. Nathaniel Oakes, Peter Horvath, and Harry Steinberg from Tufts. And then Tobias, and excuse me for this pronunciation, Esperance Kirkov from Trinity.
So it looks like the runners are lined up about halfway down the opposite length of the track, getting ready to go. This feels sort of reminiscent of a high school race, having such few competitors in the field.
Yeah, I remember I had a few 2-mile races in some of the league meets where we only had a few people, and we kind of got used to each other. And like, oh, okay, it's the same 5 or 6 people doing this race.
And
in this roughly what time we're going to run.
In this particular case, I'm hard pressed to seeing Tufts not do all right, on the simple fact that 3 of the 4 runners are from Tufts. However, the top seed time belongs to the Trinity runner L'Esperance Kirchhoff. So we'll see. We'll see if he gets a run for his money with his seat time of 9:30:45.
Yeah, he does have a seat time about 16 seconds faster than the only other runner in this race, as they're off. Peter Horvath, who comes in at 9:46, where Steinberg and Oakes have no seat time.
With a seat time of 9:30:45. But keep an eye out for our trio of jumbos: Pete Horvath, Harry Steinberg, and Nathaniel Oakes. It's been a long time since I've seen a steeple, and I'm really excited to see them go over the barriers.
So as you just heard there from the PA announcer, perhaps we got our runners announced. Looks like leading the field right now is Peter Horvath, followed by Harry Steinberg, Nate Oakes, and L'Esperance Kirchhoff trailing in the back. Perhaps it's a bit of a stall tactic, or a bit of a just waiting to see tactic by L'Esperance Kirchhoff, just to let the pace get set and maybe take charge from there.
Yeah, something I'd like to talk about first is just going to be the hurdle technique. It's a little different from your hurdle technique that you would have in a 110 or a 400. A lot of these runners, especially early on, you're just going to see them jump over it. Not necessarily the perfect hurdle form, but just doing enough to get over it. But you're going to see him get more tired as the race goes on and try and step on the steeple, especially that water jump. That's going to be a little more dangerous.
Certainly. I will say it is, important to keep in mind that these, they go over the first, he had some stumble. A little bit tougher early on in the race, and the pack is a little bit tighter. But it is important to, keep decent hurdling form so that they, conserve energy. Oh, Steinberg falls over the hurdle. Looks like he might have hurt his head a bit. Unfortunate for him. Hopefully he'll get up all right. We continue with the group here, led by Horvath now, followed by Oakes and L'Esperance Kirchhoff. Looks like Steinberg will pull himself out of the race. Sad to see.
Yeah, but it's good to see that he's okay. Obviously, the steeple is one of the more dangerous distance events, especially if you end up falling on that rail or just falling hard in general. Can lead to some real concussions. I know at least I saw one race where in the far right towards the pole area, that steeple, they jumped over it and hit their head on the rail and did some real damage. But let's see how this disqualification is going to affect the race. I assume that the Tufts runners have been running all season together. They've been doing most of their runs together. It's a bit of a gap is opening up.
Definitely, and I think that last jump you saw by Horvath is exactly the quintessential form you want in this race. Really, just nipping the top of the hurdle, just to be able to not be held up from a speed standpoint, and it's working out for him with his first place position currently.
That looks like that's Peter Horvath with the number 2 sticker.
Really a graceful jump there by him, allows him to keep the lead, and yeah, this is about, from what I remember from the 3,200 meter, about the time in the race you do start to see a little bit more distance, with Nate Oakes, falling behind a little bit more in that third hole.
And the key for that second Tufts runner is just going to be to keep on that little pack.
1,500 athletes, please check in for your event on the infield.
Once you lose an athlete in a distance race, it's very difficult to come back.
The race will begin in about 15 minutes.
And that was Harry Steinberg who fell earlier, but it looks like he is able to walk off on his own 2 legs, which is great to see.
Certainly. And, you know, it maybe comes as a little bit less of a surprise that you see Oaks in the back there, being that it is, at least will be his first recorded steeplechase for seed purposes. And for what it's worth, it was it was going to be Harry Steinberg's first recorded steeplechase time as well. So perhaps that lack of experience, unfortunately, maybe played a role in his stumble earlier on.
Yeah, something you're going to see here is, as we see Orvath getting a little bit of lead here over L'Esperance Kirchhoff, is when they are lined up together, if the Trinity runner can manage to get the gap here to be even. Something you're going to see here as we come through what I believe is the first mile in roughly 5:12 and then 5:15 for those two. So still pretty close on that first mile. But something you're going to see here is if they end up going side by side again, is just separating distance in terms of just going side to side, just to make sure that they are able to clear the hurdles. As you can see, a little fatigue in them. They are no longer simply just jumping over the hurdles. They're definitely landing on it, which is one sign that they're getting fatigued, as Oaks appear to be definitely feeling it at this point of the race, which I don't blame him. The 3K steeple is certainly a hard event to go through.
Certainly, I noticed with Oaks, as far as the fatigue shining through in these jumps, I noticed that he required a bit of a stop and then go again on the water jump. So you definitely see that. You definitely see that shining through. And now we're down to just 3 laps to go, with 6:10 elapsed in the race, with Horvath widening his lead even more. We wonder if it's seeming less likely that L'Esperance Kirchhoff can mount any sort of comeback with about 1,000 meters left in this one.
Yeah, I actually ran the 1,000 one in high school, which I think technically makes me the 1,000 meter school record holder for my high school, just because I was the only one who ran it. But that's a weird distance to run. But given that they're 2/3 of the race through, you might see a little bit of speeding up here, or at least attempt to not slow down. As you can see, they just spend a little more time in that water jump every time, which shows they're slowing down a little more.
Certainly, and I'm curious to know if it even runs through his mind, Horvath's mind, if he tries to have safer jumps, particularly around the water jump, just to make sure he doesn't hurt himself physically, but also from a race standpoint, as far as slowing him down.
Lots of long hair on the track today.
Because to me, it's really the only way that L'Esperance Kirchhoff is going to be able to come back is by Horvath, having a fall somewhere.
Yeah. I think that that definitely runs through their mind on whether you take it safer through some of the last events. Obviously, you want to go as fast as possible, as we have about 700 meters left in this race. But you can only go so fast, and maintaining safety and making sure you don't fall. Losing a second on a water jump is obviously better than losing 10 after you fall. So I think that's definitely something they're keeping in mind.
And it looks like from the list from the events list today, it looks like this will be the only race that these athletes will be competing in. You figure perhaps the overlap between the steeplechase is sort of there with the 5,000 meter, maybe even the 10,000 meter. But this is the sole focus for these athletes today. And it was going to be for Steinberg as well, but it looks like his day is obviously done.
Yeah, as we come up here with one more lap to go, so he's going to try to bring it home on this last 400.
With a lap to go at 8:41.
As he takes that hurdle pretty well.
And it looks like the at least compared to L'Esperance Kirchhoff's leading C time of 9:30, it looks like Horvath is not quite going to get there. Obviously, a little bit more difficult in such a small field, made smaller by Steinberg's injury, to really have the proper pacing, if you will, to get a great time. But we're also early in the season where perhaps these athletes' fitness levels aren't quite where they'll be in championship season. But I would predict maybe somewhere around I don't know, a 9:50 to 10-minute finish for Horvath.
Certainly, as he has about 200 meters here as we go through the last water jump, potentially one of the most dangerous dangerous jumps here as he hurdles it and makes it over.
Pete Horvath as he comes down the home stretch and is not looking back.
Obviously, I had coaches say to never look back, but let's see if he can do this final hurdle and makes it over.
Looking to break 10. We'll see if he gets it. That is Pete Horvath.
56,
finishing
57, 58, 59, and I think he got it. I think I saw a sub 10 there.
That was about as close as you come to a 10-minute flat result. And as we see Les Bruns Kirchhoff finishing at about 10:11, with Nate Oakes finishing strong. A bit of a stumble.
Almost wipes out.
Picks it up.
But he's running in strong, putting in that effort.
And he looks like he will wrap up in about 10:29, 10:28 high. A very solid first appearance for Nathaniel Oakes in this challenging 3,000-meter steeplechase.
Yeah, there's a big discussion on what the most difficult event in track is, but I think this steeple is certainly one of them, especially as you have to run, one fall and you could potentially lose the race there, as we saw earlier. And you have to keep that through 5 jumps a lap, every lap for 7.5 laps. That's a lot of laps there. As our next event coming up is going to be the 4x1, one of the more favorite events here in the track. Potentially some of the most excitement, obviously. It's very probably one of the closest things we have to team on team rather than individual on individual in track sport.
Certainly, and interesting to note, the Tufts 4x100 team, which is seated first, will only feature one of the members of the team that participated in the 100-meter dash, and that is O.J. Armstrong, the top 100-meter runner for the team. And if these numbers are any indication, he will not, contrary to popular knowledge, he will not actually be running in that 4th slot, but perhaps but it seems like the second one. So I'll be curious to know what kind of effect that has. Maybe that's just out of comfort. He likes running on the straight, but doesn't like being the last one to run, or maybe it's a coach's preference. But we'll see how it works out for the Jumbos.
Yeah, sprinters definitely have their own very personalized opinions on what leg of the 4x1 they want to run. A lot of sprinters really do not like running on the curves. I know there were some in my high school who certainly didn't. But each sprinter will have their own opinions on what they want to run. And sometimes the strategy is to put your fastest runner on the last leg, and then your second fastest potentially on the second leg on that straight right there. For example, you might have seen some of the Olympic races where Usain Bolt would always be on the last leg, and it would be the Americans or the Japanese who might be in first, and then Usain Bolt. It might have just been a matter of time until they were caught. So maybe we see that here. Maybe we see the Tufts potentially taking the lead and struggling to give it up, as they are the highest seed by a solid couple seconds here. So it's possible we see a pretty big Tufts lead, but never know what's going to happen in a 4x1.
We got 3 men's
Certainly.
4x100-meter relay teams today. One from Tufts, Wesleyan,
And
Connecticut. Tufts coming in first with the fastest seed time of
it looks like
42:08.
they're heading towards the blocks. Looks like it'll actually only just be Trinity and Tufts competing in this one. Perhaps the other schools are trying to conserve their 100-meter runners for just the dash.
And Conn today in the men's 4x100-meter relay.
I was mistaken though. It is Connecticut College and not Trinity that will be the school competing against Tufts. And I would be remiss not to mention just the real importance of the baton handoff in the 4x100. It can really make or break the race. Really want to have that advantage of having a head of steam in that subsequent runner going into the next leg of the race. So we'll see what kind of handoffs that Tufts and Connecticut College have.
Obviously, you only have a certain amount of range to get that handoff in. That is a very delicate range. And you definitely do not want to miss your handoff and see the official put their flag up, and it's always the most annoying thing. As you'll see, it looks like they have a white and a yellow flag today. If you see that yellow flag going up, that again means that something went wrong.
Certainly. And I think there's the whistle for the runners to get in their positions. And if I heard correctly from our PA announcers, it looks like Alex Lemieux will be leading us off in the one hole. And I'm having a hard time seeing where actually the other runners are. Oh, I can see Armstrong in that back right corner getting ready. So it looks like the order will be as follows on the sheet: Lemieux first, Armstrong second, Willie White in the third spot, and then Luke Botsford rounding it out at number 4. With Connecticut College, Samuel Gardner beginning, followed by Christopher Koskinen, and Sebastian Cox, and on that fourth leg, Billy Filarima.
I hope I don't commentators curse this one, but it looks like Tufts will be going to lead. So we see the teammates standing on the block method of starting.
Sophomore Lemieux getting down, and so is and they're off. Strong start by both. Good gap by Lemieux. Armstrong gets the baton. Tufts way out in the lead. You can sort of tell by them getting to the straight. Now the handoff to White. A little bit of a tougher handoff. You see the gap narrowing with a stronger pass by Connecticut College. And now here is Botsford, and a strong handoff, and some nice speed from him as well. Not even really in doubt with Tufts getting somewhere around 43 seconds, and the Connecticut College finisher around 47. What were your observations on that 4x1, Cougar?
Well, I think there was certainly a lot of rust in that race. No offense to some of the relay teams here, but one of the things you see in early on in the season, or within the case of the USA 4x1, anytime during a race, is a mess up in handoffs. Obviously, we saw one between O.J. Armstrong and Willie White on the second and third leg difference. But you saw it again on the third leg for Conn College, and definitely getting that kind of communication will be important for later races.
No doubt. I'll be curious to see how that communication and handoff work is present in the 4x1. As was just announced, in a couple of minutes, we'll be seeing one of my most favorite events of these meets, which is the 1500 meter. And just by way of preview, it seems like a field stacked with some really talented runners from Tufts. With the first seed being actually the freshman, believe it or not, Jackson O'Toole, who has run 3:55 flat, followed by the sophomore Evan Enslin, who actually last week set the 28th fastest mark in the 800 meter on the year, followed by Walter Wagude, who I believe had a very strong 800 last week as well. Another freshman, so nice to see some good, strong youth out of this Tufts team. So we'll see how that all plays out. And we have
Tufts freshman and sophomore have yet to run 1500 due to the COVID.
Yeah, actually, we do have some of the earlier event results. If you'd like to hear them, are in terms of the javelin throw. Tufts' own Nick Carnes won with a 46.87 meter throw, followed by James Geocaris from Wesleyan, and Noah Olson from Wesleyan with a 41.1 and a 37.55 meter throw, and then Rosando Aguin Sans from Conn College in 33 meters.
So with such a number of runners in the field, you're going to have to bear with us about just trying to get names here. I wanna say that just from photos on the website, I wanna say that lead runner is Evan Enslin, but I cannot quite confirm that. I guess we'll have to go by seeds. But he, being such a strong 800 runner, it would make sense to me that he would start out strong in this 1500 as well. Try to get some speed.
I think there are a couple different strategies for running 1600. There you see a Tufts runner going wide there to try and move in. I believe that is Evan Enslin. But you see the people who are going hard from the gun, which, kind of is seen in Evan Enslin there. But then the people who are able to sit in the back and try and sit and kick. And that's a pretty fast 300 right there if they're hitting 45 seconds. That's about a 4-minute mile pace, and I'm not sure how many of them are going to be able to keep that.
Certainly, you often see that at the start of these mid-distance races. Some first laps that definitely see the top runners get pretty crazy with their pace. So we see, as the PA announcer just mentioned, Evan Enslin neck and neck with a Trinity runner.
Certainly. As you can see, there are a couple Trinity runners who are taking Evan, or Evan, rather, I guess, is taking them in stride. As you can see, a attempted passing move here. Obviously, you don't want to pass on the curve because that means we're running. But if you pass on the straight, you're running roughly the same distance. As it looks like he's trailing a little more, but still able to keep with that pack. As that first pack is staying a little ahead as we come through the 700 and about 150 of those Trinity runners.
Certainly.
If I had to guess, those Trinity runners are Tim Lautenbach and Travis Martin.
So it looks like Martin is in the front, and I only gather that from the height differentials on their roster, running quite strong at his slight 5'7" frame, and it's pretty crazy. I feel like you often don't see, especially with still about 600 meters to go, such a gap between the top racers. No.
Yeah, certainly. I think, especially with some of those large gaps, you're essentially going to get the people who are probably going to win the race, and then the chase pack, as Evan Enslin is dropping back into the rest of the pack. But we do have that Trinity runner.
We have Martin having just run 2:52 through just under 3 laps on his final lap here. Looking maybe to break 4 minutes. Do you think he's got it, Cougar?
Oh, I think he's got a chance. He's coming to that 1200 in about 3:08. Granted, he's got to run at 52, which is going to be difficult. But I don't know. I'm not going to say it's impossible yet.
Oh.
It looks like he has the win by a pretty large margin at this point. Has about a 50-meter lead on the rest of the field.
And he's showing no impression of slowing down. Gives a look back. Certainly doesn't have to worry about any competition, but is just racing against the clock, trying to break 4. And if he can run 100 meters in about 20 seconds, which he certainly seems capable of, he'll get that.
But I think the race for third here is beefing up, as we have 4 possible runners who've been able to get it. Looks like Evan Enslin is pushing.
According to my watch, Travis Close is just under 62.
It looks like we have Martin finish at around 3:55, with our second runner Lautenbach at 4, Evan Enslin 4:03. So a bit slower than some of these best times by these runners, but that's to be expected again in an early season meet with with relative little diversity in the competition too. I mean, with these Tufts runners perhaps used to running against each other, it doesn't really get them to run at a much faster pace when they're kind of running at the pace they're used to from their track workouts. No.
Yeah, but obviously you don't want to peak too early in the season. They got a long season ahead of them, or I mean it's a shorter season than normal, but you still got a few meets ahead of you that you want to peak in later, as we have our second heat coming up here.
Certainly.
Second heat of the 1500 meter. They're lined up, just waiting for the approval here of the.
And as you often see for mid to long distance events, which you don't see in the 100, is really a stacking of the heats. I believe we saw really all of our best runners in that first heat, and we'll see what times come out of the second group.
Yeah. In terms of who advances to the these are the finals. Excuse me. But in terms of who we think might win here, the fastest seed time coming in is going to be Ethan Walker from Wesleyan, followed by Samuel Sturmish from Trinity, and then from Tufts we have Jack Walsh. But you never know who's going to win in these races, because it looks like they're pretty bunched up in this first section.
Certainly. And it looks like we have a Connecticut College runner. I want to say that's Ethan Millsark. Looks like Jack Walsh is the leading Tufts runner at this point. First seed in this race. And I got to say, I am partial to the striped jerseys of, I want to say, Trinity in this race. Kind of reminds me of some of the cooler looking jerseys from, or I should say, yeah, kits, jerseys, not really sure what they're called, from that I remember from my high school days.
I don't know. I like the red of the Wesleyan as they come out in about a 65, which is going to be about 4:05 if you had to estimate, but they might be a little slower.
Safe pace. Think keep it up. So it looks like we have Coleman, I guess, is Millsark, followed by Ethan Walker and Jack Walsh in third.
And Ethan Walker, duo of Ethans, leading the race right now.
The lone Wesleyan runner in this race, Ethan Walker, currently in second place. It's definitely hard running without your teammates. It's one thing to be running in a big path of jumbos, but it's another just to be running against everyone else in the race.
No, it's certainly interesting how in that first heat we saw a field that was dominated by Tufts runners just in terms of sheer quantity, and this one, which only features two. And it looks like the other Tufts runner may be Joseph Harmon.
Followed by Jack Walsh and Connor Giersch.
Connor Giersch, excuse me, who is perhaps running in his first 1500 meter at the collegiate level, being that he does not have a seed time and doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Sitting in sixth place currently.
As you can see him settling down a little more, with the exception of the top two who are attempting to break away from the rest of the field, or perhaps just not slowing down, as we had a 65 and a 69 on the first two laps. So we're going to see what this third lap is. It looks like these first two runners are keeping their pace a little more. As you can see, Walker struggling a little more. But that looks like the Conn College runners running pretty well here.
So it is likely we won't see another 4-minute breaking unless Millsark kicks it into another gear. But certainly he is not slowing down and finishing out this race quite well. With Ethan Walker peering over his shoulder, looking to see what chases him. And it looks like we might have a race for second. It looks like Walker's slowing down a bit, and the Connecticut College runner in the third is doing quite well.
But yeah, there's definitely a race for second here.
I always enjoy these, whether it's for the first position in a race or some of the some of the lower positions, just these battles, these little battles at the end here, you know, that require a good kick.
Followed by Ethan Walker of Wesleyan.
Ethan Walker getting a nice kick with a good head tilt to boot.
Jumbo of the heat, powering through the
And Jack doing a good job of powering through.
great
I think he got him.
as he finishes in about 4:20.
Walker was definitely hurting towards the end there, but I think
No
think
doubt.
that Conn College runner might have actually gotten him there on that final bit, as we see some major kicks, especially from that one Trinity runner. Obviously, we will tell you later who is able to outkick here as our final runner comes in here.
Absolutely, and it's pretty, you know, equally in the first heat as in the second. You see, you know, 5-10 seconds slower time between the seat times and what these runners put forth, and I think really in no other sport does it become quite as obvious just the need to build up to peak form, to shake off the rust from the off season.
400-meter dash. Leading the field is freshman from Tufts, Luke Botsford. Second race of the day.
But we would like to update you on some of the previous events because it looks like we have time. We do have some previous results. We can start with the shot put with Lucas Tukio from Tufts winning with a 13.55, followed by Ethan Wilkie from Trinity in second place with a 13.37. A pretty close battle there. This is all in meters. In terms of feet, it's about 44 and 43 feet. With George Moriartis with a 11.28. Dylan Daisy in fourth, both of those from Tufts with a 10.67, and then from Conn College and Wesleyan respectively, Rosendo Aguino Sanz and Charles Kaufman with an 8.9 and 8.58 meter throws.
And rumor has it he split a 48.9 in that very 4x4.
And then in terms of the 100 meter dash, the finals roster looks like it's going to be Christian Denny getting the first seed, actually beating OJ Armstrong by about 0.3 seconds. So maybe our battle in the finals may be closer than I thought it would be. With RJ Armstrong coming in, cruising into it 11.53 with Billy Flerma with an 11.6 from Conn College, followed by Reed Devontae Reed, in fourth. And then we have Faze Aladdin, Gunnar Fisher from Tufts, Jack Cloisy, also from Tufts, and then our last two qualifiers, is going to be Elijah Baldwin from Wesleyan.
So
we'll 4x1, Tufts was actually DQ'd because of the handoff in the second zone. So that's our first handoff you saw that you might have seen the judge's flag go up. So Conn College actually got the win there for their 47.14 run.
And that is just about a second slower than their seed time of 46. But particularly for these relay events, there's a bit less pressure early on in the season. Obviously, most of the good that they can do at this stage is just practice some good handoffs in practice, and hope that come the championship meets that they put up a good fight. Because like you mentioned during the event itself, Cougar, it's a point of pride for a lot of these schools, to put forth good relay teams. I mean, it's really when you see the most team-on-team feel of a competition.
Certainly.
So certainly good to have in shape.
And in case you're wondering as to whether our second runner was able to get under 4 minutes, they were not. They ran about a 4:02. But our Travis Martin definitely was.
And it was an impressive run, certainly. And looks like they are down just about ready for the 400 meter. Another set. And they're off. We have
and that's a
strong start by
start.
Botsford, making up ground on the seat outside of him.
Absolutely. Obviously, you can win from the outside lane, but it's going to be a lot easier given that you can see everybody else in more of the middle lanes.
No doubt. Botsford continuing to make up ground, really powering and strong, and the clear leader, I feel, going into this last 100. We'll see if he can. We'll see if he can PR. Doing quite a great job. We see Trinity and Wesleyan falling behind. I think he's going to get that PR he's been looking for. And he does. Looked like 48 high.
Appeared to be a 48 for Luke Botsford. We'll have to see what the official time is, though.
Which will be a good, around a second faster than
looks like
his
that'll be a
seat time.
PR for him.
Quite impressive.
Comes powering down the home stretch in an unofficial PR of 48 high. That looked great.
And Luke, the freshman no less, really pulling out a great time. I remember it was always quite a big deal in the Jersey State high school meets to break 50, and always an impressive feat, even at the collegiate level.
Yeah, absolutely. As you see, our next heat perhaps might be a little slower in terms of the times. We are expecting somewhere in the 52 to 53 range for a lot of these guys. But those PRs definitely would always feel good, even if it mattered to nobody but yourself. But obviously, your teammates are probably going to support you if they hear over the PA system that you're about to hit a big PR.
Definitely. And I will announce names as we see them.
Discus throwers, please report to check in at the event area. Would the Wesleyan discus throwers please report to the event area? Thank you.
You think we could see another runner break 50 or Cougar?
I think we definitely can. Sometimes in the second heats, you don't necessarily have a ton of competition ahead of you, so you might have more desire to try and get that win. But it'll be definitely competitive. I think there are a couple runners that can do it. Vincent Alone and Aaron Foote both have a 52 flat seat time. A lot of times when you hear a 52.00 or 0.5 or something like that, that could mean that the coach is putting in estimated times rather than direct times. So you never know what those kind of runners could potentially pull out.
Certainly. And interesting, we see the runner in lane 2 going without blocks.
Yes,
something you don't often see.
Race.
And the second heat of the 400 meters is off, featuring Chris Tilton, the freshman, and Jack Hirsch, the junior, from the Jumbos.
And as you just heard, Chris Tilton, Jack Hirsch.
Chris Tilton making up the stagger.
And
the race still looks pretty even as they head into the second
Chris
turn.
Tilton looking strong, making up some ground. We see a bit of a battle on the outside. Looks like it could favor the Jumbos, knowing how the geometry works over there.
Given it looks like you're going to have a pretty close race here, actually, between the Jumbos. Tilton and Hirsch are going to probably bring this one in, along with the Wesleyan rider, Aaron Foote. But, it's close here. I don't know who's going to win this.
And the Wesleyan athlete pulls out
Foote looks like he may take this.
So Kevin DeLowry, perhaps.
Jack Hirsch is coming on
quite
strong,
well.
but it's looking like Wesleyan and 52 high or 53 low.
And interestingly enough, that the Trinity athlete who started without blocks had a bit of a slow stretch towards the beginning of that race, but really powered on in the end. Who knows what kind of difference it would have made having had blocks to start the race? It would have propelled him to victory.
Yeah, I got to be honest. It's a little strange not seeing blocks in a college race. It seems like most of the quick runners typically use them. Maybe he's a distance runner who's not quite comfortable with them. There could be a lot of things that could cause a runner not to wear blocks, but it's definitely strange seeing that in a college race, not something you typically see.
No doubt.
100-meter dash finals will be in 15 minutes. A repeat of the qualifiers for the 100-meter dash final is Christian Denny, O.J. Armstrong, Billy Florima.
So our next race will be the 110-meter hurdle final. Always an exciting one with obstacles abounding and a lot of jumping going on.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun race to watch, and then the hurdles obviously coming up in the 110 hurdles. It's going to be great to see. And then we also, you may be able to see the pole vault going on, as we've seen a variety of pole vaulters able to go up. I don't currently know what height they are vaulting at, but I think the pole vault is definitely one of the more entertaining events, perhaps undervalued in the track community. Obviously, one of the more difficult and perhaps less translatable to other events. You have sprinting ability, and then you have jumping ability, and then you have the going over the pole ability that isn't necessarily replicated in other events. It's not directly translatable, so you have to have a very unique skill set to complete it.
That's true. At my high school, it was a weird coincidence that my hockey team's goalie was also our best pole vaulter who ended up at Rhode Island. So you never know what kind of where you'll see that skill translation between such a unique, two really unique positions in pole vaulting and being a hockey goalie. And I just got word, I think, just from the shouting conversation by our PA announcers that apparently OJ Armstrong may not be competing in this 100-meter final. So we'll see. That certainly opens up the field, and I believe puts Christian Denny in a great position, having had, as it is, the best qualifying time in that second heat of the preliminaries, and perhaps that's why OJ was not quite as fast. Perhaps he had some sort of injury bothering him that maybe, who knows, got aggravated a little bit more during that relay.
For a second there, I thought you were always implying that OJ was a little scared of the competition. But yeah, obviously early in the season there could be many potential injuries that could flare up with these athletes. But I'm a little sad personally just to see. I think it would have been a great race between them. But obviously there still could be a great race ahead. But the early prediction is that Denny's going to take that 100-meter. But before that race, we do have the hurdle still being set up, which is going to be interesting to see. Our highest seed time coming in is going to be in what I think is going to be lane 4, Willie White from Tufts with a 15.6. You might have heard him earlier on the third leg of the 100-meter, part of that missed up handoff. But yeah, it'll see if he can right that wrong from earlier, which he should be able to do. I believe this is his favorite event. And
we'll see Jack Clohissy again, who is really rattling off a bunch of events in this first half of the meet, having competed in the 100 prelims, qualifying for the 100 final, and just before that, we'll take part in this 110 meter hurl.
Certainly, and then we can still see some of the pole vaulters going on, and then also what I believe may be the hammer throw in the distance, if we're able to potentially see that. We know there's a little bit of tree line and some fences that could prevent the population of it. But I think one thing we could talk about is the use of masks here. You do see them on most of the athletes able to wear them, which I think is great, but it's definitely going to be difficult breathing hard with a mask. Professionals don't necessarily use it, but I think it's great to see on the D3 level as the athletes are starting to get set here.
Certainly, and you could tell it was tough for some of these distance runners to keep them up. Whether out of just wanting to have a little more air to breathe, or just because they were getting wet and falling. But yeah, it's certainly a challenge if you're trying to to get air through, to have it pass their mask, and perhaps could be some of the reason why we're not seeing quite as quick of times.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one factor. Balancing safety and safety of your community, but also running as fast as times and trying to make the athletes comfortable. Certainly a fine line to cross. But I think trying to enforce the mask when you can is probably a good step in that direction. I know the commentators are wearing masks, but obviously it's a little different, talking out loud versus having to run.
Doesn't hamper our performance. At least I hope not. But right, certainly much different for these athletes. I would say it would. I might be butchering this, but it might have some effect on that VO2 max that is so often glorified among endurance and speed athletes.
Certainly. Obviously when you're unable to take your max amount of oxygen in, although, you still have like 98, 99% of your oxygen you're taking in terms of like oxygen saturation and that kind of thing. It's still certainly difficult, but I think it's good that we're seeing these athletes still trying to wear them for the most part.
800-meter
Absolutely.
run. Please check in for
And
your runs on the infield.
looks like the
800-meter
110-meter runners are
on the infield.
getting towards the starting position.
In about 15 minutes. Thank you.
And as was just announced, stay tuned for the 800-meter. Well, so I should say first the 100 finals, but then the 800 followed by that in just 15 minutes. A good slate of events we have coming up.
Yeah, one of the things about track scheduling is sometimes in the middle you kind of have a quick slate, and then you have a break as you have to set up the hurdles and then the 5K, I believe, that's also going to take place.
Absolutely. So we see the runners get into their positions, awaiting the call to get set. Still see one. Yep. Oh, had a bit of a fault, it looked like, from that middle Tufts runner. Or actually, it turns out 3 of them. Oftentimes, it's the case where you see one move and then the others move. It's kind of like a false start in football with the offensive linemen getting all pretty jumpy.
Yeah, it's a little harder to call a foul on everybody but the center in track, but yeah, sometimes the runners are just a little too anxious to get off, and then they go a little too early.
Certainly.
But I think one of the more interesting aspects now of track is you can sometimes have video review, obviously not in a D3 race, but in professional. And obviously there's a factor in track where you have to react based on the gun. And sometimes you could time it right and you get a 0.01 second reaction, but then they call it back because you didn't actually react and just timed it based on the gun starter's chiming. But I think you will see if there's going to be any false starts here, but I assume there won't be in our singular heat here of the men's 110 hurdles.
And interesting to see they've taken so much time to get reset here. It might actually be an issue with the starting gun. The judge looking like he's reloading the ammo, if you will, and they're about ready to get going.
They don't actually use a real bullet, do they? I mean, obviously not one that's gonna hit somebody, but like, do they ever use like a plastic thing?
I think it might just be powder. I always remember from high school just burst that would come off of the gun, but hard to tell from this distance. Oh, just 3 of them.
Looks like 3 athletes. We're gonna see who's gonna come out on top. Close
Really tight. Looks like the Wesleyan athlete will get the win here.
That was one of the Wesleyan athletes pulling ahead.
That could either be Nick Creeley or Mason Martelli.
It was Mason, according to some guy on the infield. Thank you.
It's sounding like Mason Martell got the victory here, followed by the 2 Tufts runners. So an upset of sorts. And we will see the hurdles getting taken off quickly to make room for this 100-meter final.
Tufts, helper crew, let's help out and get those hurdles off the track.
Almost.
I remember the coaches would always yell at us to take the hurdles off as quick as possible, and the distance runners would somehow always get wrangled into helping out.
Absolutely. It's the price you pay when your events are at the end of the meet. For these 5,000 and 10,000 meter runners, you're definitely putting in work before your real work begins.
Yeah, and I think one of the possibly the most anticipated event of the day, maybe second most anticipated, the 4x1 and 4x4. But the 4x1 is probably one of the more anticipated events. It is probably the flagship event of track and field, the one that everybody does from the kindergarten onwards, racing their friends down 100 meters. It's going to be very interesting to see if Denny can have any kind of real competition here. I think that he may get some. I think it's certainly possible. But it will be interesting to see if he actually has any competition. And you will see him likely in lane 4, as we heard that O.J. Armstrong will not be competing.
I would guess so. Oftentimes that is where you see those top runners, kind of towards the middle lanes there. But right, certainly without Armstrong in the mix, you see even more of a gap in terms of the qualifying results between the top sprinter and Denny, and who will now be presumably the second seed, if you will, Billy Fleurima, with a qualifying time of 11:63.
Yeah, I believe that Fleurima from Conn College, if I can pull up my rosters here, is a he's a junior this year. Apologies for the wait. But one of the runners here that actually had some experience in a previous race, perhaps getting a little more rare, given that the 2020 season, outdoor at least, didn't necessarily get to happen the way most of these runners wanted. So getting this real competition against the NESCAC, I think it does provide a certain advantage over the rest of the field.
With a time of 11:22.
But Fleurima and Aladdin are the only two runners who have a time coming into today. So the winner of this will likely be the new NESCAC leader, which is exciting to see. It's always great to have a conference lead. Always feels good, even if it's not necessarily against all of the potential runners. But I do think Denny is going to take it. We will see what happens. A lot can happen in 100 meters, even though it's the shortest event on the track. But a lot can happen, and you never quite know what's going to happen.
That is true, and I think it's worth mentioning that even just in this qualifier, Christian Denny PR'd by running 11:22, which bested his 11:3 flat PR from I don't know when, but from his career. So impressive stuff to see from him, and then we'll see if he can build off that for maybe even another PR in this final here. And
yeah,
you wonder what
setting 2 PRs in a day, only about an hour apart, can certainly be difficult, but not necessarily impossible. Some of the runners are starting to get into their positions.
The results of the men's javelin throw.
and
In 4th place, Rosendo Aguano Sanz of Connecticut College.
get some of their last strides in. Denny popping out.
In 3rd place, Noah Olson of Wesleyan in 37.5 meters. In 2nd place, James Gilcaris of Wesleyan in 41.18 meters. And winning the event from Tufts is Nick Carnes in 46.87 meters. Just heard
there that Nick Carnes, as we mentioned earlier, I guess Nick Carnes is our winner in the Jav. So nice to see Tufts holding their own turf and winning that event. And it looks like for the meet results that Tufts is leading so far. With 81.5 points, followed by Trinity with 44, Wesleyan with 25.5, and Connecticut College with 23. So it could be just a matter to some extent of just how many Tufts athletes have been entered into events. But nonetheless, impressive work by the Jumbo so far as we get ready for the 100-meter final. Getting the legs nice and stretched out.
As the runners are set.
Another false start, I guess, somewhat unsurprising in one of these short, needing to react quickly events, just as we saw in the 110-meter hurdle. So we'll let these athletes get reset and get them off with the next attempt.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, they usually they give them a warning first. I think that's what we're seeing here.
Right. If it's the same the same offender 2 times in a row, presumably they'd get disqualified. It's off, and it looks like you're getting the V you expect.
Pulling ahead already, Christian Denny from Wesleyan.
Looks like it's Denny, followed by a Trinity athlete.
Christian Denny from Wesleyan coming in first in the finals.
So without much doubt, we see Christian Denny take home the win. Be curious to know what that time was, and also curious to know what role the wind might have played there. Hard to tell in this direction where it's blowing.
Yeah, it was about a 1.8 earlier, and I assume it's roughly now the same. I don't see a flag. I just see one in the distance, but it's heading, I don't know what direction that is cardinally. But in terms of the race, getting back to it, in second place we had Devontae Reed from Trinity, followed by perhaps, let's see, Billy Flerma from Conn College. But we will report to you once we get the automatic timing, since I think that's one of the better parts of running is the presence of automatic timing that allows you to accurately determine who won every single race down to 1/100th of a second.
In first place,
Definitely.
University with a score of 81.50. In second place, Trinity with a score of 44. In third place, Wesleyan with a score of 25.50. And in fourth place, Conn College with a score of 23.
For a sport that says, it goes by the clock in terms of who's considered the best, it's useful and important that they go by the automated time, or it's useful that there is automated time.
Yeah, certainly. But our next event is perhaps Max's favorite, the 800-meter run. It's a relatively small field here. Only about 4 runners entered, I believe. There are 4 runners: Bennett McDougall from Conn College, Erican Verbeek, Caleb Habter Gabriel, and then Steven Tyler from Conn College and Trinity, respectively. But a lot of these runners are grouped around that elusive 2-minute barrier that so many runners in their 800-meter history try and cross. It'll be interesting to see how many of them can get the PRs they want to today. And I think it's going to be it's a fun race. Some about the 800-meter that I think is certainly special about it is that it's the sprint of the distance world. It is a weird balance between the 400, where it's a sprint for most of the time, and then the mile, which is pretty much it's a distance event. So you have runners that could come from the sprints that are perhaps longer sprinters and could keep that energy, and then the distance runners who can get him back in the end potentially, who are coming down from longer events. So it's a little more rare to see specialization in the 800 compared to other distance events, but it is certainly a fun race to watch.
No doubt. The real like you mentioned, Cougar, the real hybrid event of the events we see in track, and an interesting one for that reason. And I think, depending on the way the race is run, you could see one type of runner versus another have more success. Perhaps a pack that goes out a little too fast could see more of a 1500-meter specialist just outlast everyone and be able to kind of surpass the ones who went out fast. Or maybe it's a little bit slower, and the person with wheels at the end who knows how to kick super well can be the one who overtakes the field.
Yeah. Max, did you ever have what was your 800-meter strategy as we wait for some of the runners to start coming on the track?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, I only got to run the race about 3, 4 times in my career, one of which was a relay. But I think, I think just trying to keep a comfortable pace that won't kill you on that first lap is definitely crucial. And then I think turning certainly those last 300 meters into a sprint, just to make it feel like you really left it all out there, I think is key as well. Obviously, energy permitting, but I think the 800 meter more than any other race is a sort of feel it out kind of process. I think it's very much dependent. Like, you got to run the race depending on how you're feeling that day, like what you think you're capable of in terms of pacing. So it's unique in that way.
Yeah, I think I agree. It is hard to run your own race strategy when you have several other people around you. A little easier in a race with only about 4 people. 3, excuse me. There's only the other Conn college runner did not make it to the track today.
200-meter runners, please declare and check in on the infield.
And it makes
Thank you.
Makes it hard for us to figure out who the runners are.
I believe that is going to be Bennett McDougall in lane 1, Eric and Verbeek in lane 2, who's getting overtaken here, and then Steven Tyler in lane 4. So McDougall, I think, is starting in the lead here. He's going to hit the 200 in about 28 seconds, which is pretty fast. That's looking like it'll be somewhere around the 2-minute range.
And I think it's to these runners' advantage as far as getting a good time. The fact that they are bunched up together, I think they'll be pushing themselves. And when you see more distance, you might see that top runner get a little more lax, But as long as they stay tight, I think there'll be some good competition and hopefully some good times that come out of it.
Now, what you're probably going to see here is Tyler try and get in the lead potentially, or not. He's going to move into lane 1 to conserve distance, most likely, and there he is. But here we have Verbeek currently winning as they come in roughly around 1 minute.
And we see it's basically turning into a 2-man show with McDougall and one of the runners from Trinity. 1 and 2 here. So that'll be probably what we keep on watch for breaking that 2-minute barrier, with McDougall hopping out to the lead.
As we see McDougall coming in here, actually one of the slower seeds here.
It looks like that's Bennett from Connecticut College pulling away.
But here they come down the last stretch. Looks like McDougall's going to take it.
And Verbeek in second here. But looking like Young might be able to catch up.
59. It's a little over 2 minutes. That's got to be frustrating.
Absolutely, but nonetheless, a great race. Great race by McDougall. Certainly nothing to hang his hat on. And I would expect, as the season wears on and he gets some more, and he gets his 800-meter legs under him a little bit more, he'll certainly be able to break that 2-minute barrier.
Yeah, I know I always felt the worst after my 800-meter races, probably because I never hit the times I wanted, but also because it's one of the hardest events, and you are essentially sprinting for a pretty decent chunk of that. But it's definitely unlikely not to get under 2 minutes there. Probably pretty frustrating as a runner, especially, it's this very clear barrier that you're trying to get onto. And then just barely missing your goal, it's got to be frustrating.
Ben Stein with a jump of 6.37 meters.
No doubt.
Second place, Matt Mantega, also from Tufts, with
obviously a bit more difficult, but it's sort of akin to the 4-minute mile that so many of the top high school and certainly college runners more often at the, well, I guess you don't really see the 1600 meter run at the collegiate level, but certainly in high school, you always see the top 3 runners more or less every year kind of vying for that accolade.
Certainly, yeah. We would like to review some of the results from the men's long jump here, as we have the Trinity jumper, Kennard Hughes, eked out the victory by 1/100th of a meter, winning by 6.55 over Matthew Mantega, 6.54. That's going to be frustrating. It's only about a half an inch difference. 21.6 and then 21.5.5 to your feet. In third, you have Ben Stein picking up 6 points.
Tufts helpers, please put these 400 hurdles on the track.
Noah Olson.
The event is up next, and we need your help now. So please, if you're a Tufts helper or finish your event, put those hurdles on the track. Thank you.
20 feet and 6.5 inches for your long jump, as you might have been able to see earlier. As we wait for the hurdles to get set up, 400 hurdles, another difficult event as you were sprinting and running as hard as you can around the track. 400 hard enough, not to mention putting hurdles in there to try and disrupt the problem.
Do you think the strategy ever changes, Cougar, where you might be a little less hesitant to go all out for that normal 400 because there are the hurdles in the way?
Let's get some more Tufts helpers around the back hurdle track to get those hurdles out for the 400-meter hurdles.
100 meters per race, whatever. Just due to the extra effort you have to expend when you have to stand up and jump over them. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how these runners react to it. I know that whenever I had to try and jump over a hurdle, it never went very well. And my event ended with a few face plants. But it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up taking it here when the race starts. Some of the blocks are starting to get laid out. But in terms of total meet strategy, it looks like the jumbos, I believe, currently lead. But it will be interesting to see who ends up taking the final score at the end. But we likely won't know.
All Tufts
who's
200-meter athletes, please check in now. All Tufts 200-meter athletes, please check in now.
Score as we progress.
Absolutely.
Oh, we got to mute the new camera.
And I think one of the worries always in this 400-meter hurdles is, was a bit of a concern at the steeplechase as well, is especially as fatigue.
Up next on the track,
as
we have
fatigue
the men's
sinks in, just
400-meter
making sure
hurdles.
you're clearing that hurdle and not getting
A small heat of 3 athletes. We got 2 from Tufts and 1 from
expend your
Conn
energy
College.
even more, or cause you to get hurt and need to exit the race.
Yeah, certainly.
So make sure you send that line.
Max, when you ran, was there anything in your mind that you were thinking about before your race started? Any nerves or just focusing on the race?
That's a great question. I think I was always somewhat blue in the face of running the 3,200 meter, just 8 laps. Seems quite intimidating to me. I think, and perhaps it was because I wasn't built for it, having that attitude. But I think, alternatively, when I would run the 800 and 1600, it was always more of a focus on strategy, kind of thinking about what the theme, if you will, of each lap is going to be. For example, in the 1600 meter being a 4-lap race, that first lap I just, tried to stay within striking distance, make sure I wasn't destroying myself. Second and third, I would maybe take it a little bit easier, make sure I was just sticking in there as well, to ensure that that last lap would let me hop people, as I could, to try to, get as close to that front as possible. I felt all right being a little bit farther behind, in order to make up some and need to make up some ground in that last lap. And what was your sort of thought processes, Cougar, before the 3,200 meter?
Well, I think it was somewhere in the lines of don't false start. But also, sizing up the competition. afternoon. I don't know if I necessarily would talk to the guys right next to me, but I know it's, look them up and down.
That was a great high jump
let 'em know
by
your
Harry
business.
Reinecker-Found from Tufts University.
But yeah, just mentally just focusing on your race strategy there, knowing what you're going to do, making sure that you don't false start, your foot isn't above the line, or past the line rather. Obviously for sprints, your start matters a little more than perhaps some of the distance events that we would do.
You could probably, walk that first step or two at the 3,200 meter and it wouldn't kill you too much, but certainly nice to, in any race, get the momentum going good early on, and it will be no less important in this 400 meter hurdles race, just to get off those blocks firing. That is, if you have blocks. It looks like the Connecticut College runner in lane 3 will be opting not to use blocks.
And then for the runners in this race, we have John Fuller from Conn College, and then Brian Quartang and Reed Corliss. And I think this may be the first, never mind. I was about to say this is the first race where my seed time wouldn't have been last, but then I realized they have hurdles to jump over. So, yeah, I probably still would have been last year. But it's interesting to see the lack of block start. I don't think it's something you see too often in college.
Certainly not. We'll see how it works out for him. And they are off.
Men's 400 meter dash is off. Top seed Brian
Looks like
Quartang.
Fuller is off to a bit of a slower start than the other two, with a stumble on that first hurdle.
Yeah, for some of these races, if you stumble on the first one, then you're out, especially in the 400. But alternatively, there's a lot of time to make up. You got about a minute. These races. Ooh, as we see a fall from the Conn College runner, Fuller looks like he is out of this race, making this a 2 race for the Jumbos.
And I've been impressed, and maybe this is just part of the skill of being a 400 hurdle runner, is that they've been kind of knocking over these hurdles, but still doing quite well, just to stay in the race.
Yeah, obviously, knocking over hurdles is sometimes part of the race, but doesn't necessarily slow you down.
Certainly, and we got some PRs, it looks like, for both of our runners here. Basically, it looks like PRing by about a second or two each. Pretty impressive. Well, maybe Corliss, yes, but Quartang getting around his PR time. Impressive for this this early season race.
Yeah, you can also see some of the teammates coming together there. Obviously, they're happy for each other, both knowing they run fast. They're probably competitive within each other as to who gets to win today. But I'm sure they're both happy to get potential PRs, as they're pretty tired after that race, I'm sure. And then coming up here, we have the 200 dash. It may be potentially difficult to determine who is in what heat, but we will let you know who's in what.
And for this 200 coming up, we will only be having a finals. There will be no preliminaries, so we'll get several heats, and then it'll simply be best time goes as the winner. And once again, we should see a bit more of an open field with OJ Armstrong presumably still out of competition, which will turn our top seed into Robert Allen of Trinity College, who did not run in the 100 meter dash, it looks like, which is somewhat rare for college runners, given that there is such overlap between the 100 and 200. See how it works for him.
With a time of 16:47, and first place Mason Martell from Wesleyan with a time of 16:26.
Yeah, I think with the 200, I think it's arguably a better event than the 100. There may be a hot take among track and field fans, but I think you have a lot more time for the sprinting to open up, along with some arguably faster running. Plus, you have to see how the runners navigate the curves, which may sound simple, but I think it is a skill within itself, managing to place your feet perfectly every time, as to not go into another lane and disqualify yourself. But as our race goes along here, you do see some of the Tufts students adding and helping out within the meet, which I think is great to see. You also see a truck helping move a truck that Tufts owns, helping to move some of the hurdles, which I always wished that we had in high school. We used to just rely on whoever was open to help bring them over. But we definitely could have used a truck to help us.
Certainly, these track meets take quite a bit of time to begin with, so nice to have the opportunity to expedite the process wherever you can.
Just got the freshman record with a height of 1.95 meters. Great job, Harry.
And you might have just heard that Harry Reinecker found just broke the Tufts freshman record with a high jump of 1.95 meters. Quite impressive stuff
Men's 200 meters
from
will have
him.
2 heats, starting in front of the field house and ending in the far end.
And he, as by way of fun fact, is from Lewis, England. Another Brit represented this meet, equal to Devonte Reed.
Certainly, the English do actually have they have a pretty nice running program. They're not necessarily winning the Olympics, but especially on the women's side, they do pretty well in the relays, which is always nice to see. But it does lead to some American on English accent, which is very entertaining from the perspective of some of the fans. But I think one of the things we're looking forward to here, especially this summer, is going to be the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. Obviously, it was canceled due to coronavirus in 2020. So I cannot wait to be able to watch some real track and field races in person again, or not in person, but actually happen. And I cannot wait for the summer.
Absolutely. Do you know if they're going to be calling it Tokyo 2020 or Tokyo 2021?
Believe it or not, I think that they're still going to be referring to it as Tokyo 2020.
People like even numbers. What can you say? You have the World Cup falling on even years, the Winter Olympics falling on the same year as the World Cups, the World Cups. So I guess they're sticking to the branding.
Yeah, I suppose it just costs too much money to reprint everything.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure they were, just weeks out from putting in a lot of, and I'm sure they even still put in a lot of the marketing stuff for a lot of the, banners around Tokyo for the Olympics. So, as you mentioned, from a financial standpoint, it makes sense that they would just, keep all of the 2020 branded materials as they were.
Definitely. I think the event I'm most looking forward to in the Olympics is going to be the 4x1 and the 4x4. The U.S. has a pretty rough history in terms of our relays. We've had a drop baton in either a prelim or a final in pretty much everyone I can remember recently. And getting to see if we can actually rectify that, especially in the wake of Usain Bolt not necessarily competing as much as he used to. It's going to be very interesting to watch that kind of post-Usain Bolt, Tyson Gay kind of time. But here we have the 200 starting from the right of your screen and then ending up on the far side of the field.
Luke Botsford coming in second from Tufts, a time of 22. And Alex Lemieux from Tufts also with a time of 22.
Looks like we will have our first heat coming up in just a moment as the blocks get set up. We're starting to get to a length of an event where it's somewhat unquestionable whether you'd have blocks. If you don't, you're certainly not going to be winning this race. It's a field, at least in this heat, dominated by Trinity runners, with a lot of them occupying those coveted middle lanes.
Men's 5K, make sure you have checked in by now.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting heat. We're going to see if the lone two Tufts runners are able to compete against the rest of the field. But given that they're in lane 1 and 9, maybe a little more difficult. But you never know. Wade Van Nierik won the 400-meter world record in lane 9. So maybe the lane advantage is perhaps a little overrated.
I'll put it in air quotes. He got a head start as far as his positioning vertically on the track, but no, perhaps if you have a certain level of comfort in a lane that might seem a little bit obscure in terms of where people typically have success, perhaps you can pull off that surprise.
Certainly, as some of the runners start to get warmed up, start to shake some of the energy out. Obviously, one of the things you see is runners kind of shaking it out, just due to nerves potentially, or trying to get warmed up.
Doubt.
But everybody has their own warm-up routine they're going to go through.
Like we talked about, I think the shaking is almost as much physical as mental, just getting yourself in that headspace. And interestingly, we see people backing the blocks to make sure, I guess, they don't get pushed. I don't know if I've seen that before.
And they're off.
And we see strong start on that first lane.
Alex with a fast start.
Alex Lemieux looking really good.
Ooh, he
and
pulls up.
But he
Oh,
pulls
that's
up.
gotta hurt.
We still see the Tufts runner on the outside, doing quite well. Luke Botsford, perhaps.
Trinity and Luke from Tufts.
Looking great.
Strong 400, and it's Luke. with
Doing
another great performance on the day. We'll see
incredible
what the
for the
time
freshman.
are. We're still waiting on that 400 meter.
Coming out of lane 9, like we talked about, Cougar, that just sort of unorthodox, successes you see sometimes in lane positioning that might not really reflect their skill, which is the case here. But being the three seed, perhaps Botsford just opted to be in what's considered a less coveted lane. Obviously it worked out for him.
Yeah, perhaps upsetting Allen from Trinity there with the higher seed. But Botsford did have some success earlier
Up next, it looks like
in
we're
the
gonna
4x1, I
have our second
believe.
final heat
But
of the men's 200.
is able to take the win in the 2. And you will see that kind of success from one event to another in the 1 and
Coming
2.
back from earlier.
A little more difficult to extend that to the 400, just due to different sprinting skill sets. But usually, if you're good at 1, you're good at 2. There's a definitely connection between there, as we see our second heat going to take off in a couple minutes.
And yeah, in terms of that success in the 100, 200, I mean, certainly it's the case with Usain Bolt. And I remember there was a rivalry back in the 90s between Michael Johnson, the very successful 100-meter runner from the U.S. and I'm forgetting the man's name, but the 200-meter world record holder from Canada, who were just constantly debating who was the world's fastest man, because it is hard to say. The 100, in a pure sense, is showing you're the fastest, but there is the aspect of the bend that requires a little more agility, I guess, and shows a little more stamina-based speed.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to miss Usain Bolt. If it ever comes out that he is doping somehow, then I'm going to be sad, to be honest.
Agreed. It's been quite a career, and for what we know now, untarnished.
Yeah, he's the Messi of track. He's the Michael Jordan of track. I can name any number of figures, and Usain Bolt's status in the sport is simply unmatched as the runners get set.
And they're off. You see, looks like the middle runner from Connecticut College getting off to a great start, as he already makes up ground on the outside runner. And see some widening with the
He's
inside.
overtaken him.
Oh.
Maybe it's going to be close.
Wow.
And it's a close finish in the second heat of the men's 200.
Neck and neck, absolutely. It's I think something you see in the 200 versus 100 where you can see a bit more of, back and forth between the runners, where in the 100, once someone pulls ahead, it's somewhat rare, especially at these higher levels, to see someone then come back. But, as evidence here, we saw, a little bit of that cat and mouse.
and Christian Denny from Wesleyan
Yeah,
in
certainly.
first with a time of
Um,
11:11.
Our
Sounds
next
lucky.
event coming up is going to be the men's 5K. So this one may take a little longer, as most of the times you're probably going to be in the 15
Next
to
up on the
16
track
minute
in 7
range.
minutes will be the men's
Um,
5,000 meter run.
But come
Keep
back
an eye
in
out
about
for
7
the
minutes.
Wesleyan trio of
We'll still
Miles
be here.
Arenau, Will
But
Ratner, and Dale Ross, with
our
matching
next event is
seat
going to be in
times
7
and
minutes, the
performances
men's
and time
5K.
trials to boot. It'll be a close race between the 3 teammates and the Connecticut College challengers behind them.
I feel like running a 5K has been on my recent list of goals. Something I haven't quite been able to do yet, but hopefully a little more motivated with the changing weather. But the vibe of this 5K will be much
The
different,
results have been
much more
released for the men's
competitive.
800 meter run final from earlier. In third
Certainly,
place was
yeah.
Steven Tyler
I know
from
I've been off
Trinity
my running
in
game for a
2
while.
minutes and 3
Haven't
seconds.
really been active, or as active as I perhaps should be.
Closely following Erkin Verbeek
But
in second
I
from
think I
Trinity
definitely
in
want to get back on there. Maybe we
2:02.9.
should start a
With
JumboCast
the
running
winner
club.
from Connecticut College, Bennett McDougall,
It'll be
just
fun.
over 2 minutes at 2 minutes.
Maybe we can get to the level of even challenging some of these distance runners from the track
Tufts
squad.
is leading the chase in
Probably a
the
pipe
team
dream.
score with 99.5 points, followed by Trinity with 66.
I've always wanted to do a
Wesleyan
race
with
where some of the
48.5.
members of
And
JumboCast
Connecticut
do a
College
relay with the same
in
distance
fourth
as
with
one
34 points.
Tufts runner, and see who wins.
That would be fun.
Alternatively, maybe a JumboCast. I don't know, what's it called? Pentathlon or something like that.
Yeah.
Where we do a bunch of events and try and
Agreed.
see who wins.
It would be I'm sure the most physical activity a lot of us have done in quite a while. But a good way to shake the rust off. The most athletic we've gotten has been with our flag football team, which was a lot of fun, but something unfortunately we've been able to do in a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, shifting our attention back to the track here, I will give a preview of what's to come with the 5,000 meter run. So we have, it really is tight as it gets. My prediction is some of these seed times might just be predictions of how fast these guys can run. We have the top 3 Wesleyan runners listed at 15 minutes, 15 seconds. And then a pair of, and that goes Miles Arenau, Will Ratner, Dale Ross at 1, 2, 3. Then a pair of Connecticut College runners who have been seeded with times of 15 minutes, 20 seconds, Ethan Milsark and Chris Verstandig, followed by Owen Rogers, Aiden Ward from Wesleyan with times of 15:45. And we have to go pretty far just for the hometown crowd. We have to go somewhat far to meet our first our first seeded Tufts runners, the only ones of the field. Seeds 13 through 15, Oliver Printy, Michael Kennedy, and Adam Bernstein, all listed with seeds of 16 minutes.
Yep.
Cougar, how do you think these seeds are? Do you think, not that we have much knowledge of these runners, but just from your knowledge of how confident or maybe like unconfident track coaches are, do you think these are generally maybe under seeds, over seeds? I'm curious.
I think we haven't necessarily seen a lot of these runners get in a real race. In terms of the top 10 for the NESCAC, we only have about 7 below 16 minutes, which is, we have 8 seated here. And most of these runners don't necessarily have a real time so far this season, which is what you can therefore understand from the estimated seat times. Being just that, estimated seed times for most of these runners. But it will be interesting to definitely see what some of these runners can put out. It looks like some of the Wesleyan runners may be some of the higher seeded ones with a rough seed time about 15:15, followed by a couple college ones at 15:20. So we might see a pack of about 5 or 6 there trying to run their own race.
Certainly.
And then after that, maybe a pack of basically everybody else in the field, about 10 runners who are attempting to break the 16-minute barrier and get pretty decently far below that, which I believe to break 16 in the 5K, you need to run about, I forget the exact time, but you need to run a 5:09 per mile, which is pretty speedy. which you're going to see about 76 to 77 second laps. So we're going to be watching that lap counter pretty carefully, just to see how they're doing on pace. But it looks like they're jogging up to the line pretty soon here, finishing those strides before you start the race.
And just to give our viewers an idea of generally the times we're seeing, it's a little bit tough to say because it's really a new slew of runners in the 5,000 meters, and it makes sense because they're just trying to get experience in these greater distance races, so may as well have them maybe alternate between the 5,000 and 10,000. But just to give an idea, we saw in the April 11th meet last Sunday between just Tufts and Connecticut College. By way of reminder, the winner was Matt Carter with an amazing time of 14:38.97, followed by Sam Gotti at 15:13, Peter Horvath at 15:14. Joseph Harmon with 15:26, and Harry Steinberg, who finished with 15:36. So they tow up to the line now, and we'll see how the group does.
Yeah, obviously we're looking for a potential NESCAC leading time to put him in the NESCAC Championships course. But I'm just excited to see who wins this race. I honestly have no idea who's going to win. And I'm very excited to see what happens. Obviously the 5K rather, is a long one. So sit back and cheese, folks, and they're off.
It's a tight field with no California start. As our 5K runners begin to
Quite intimidating when you see 12 laps to go. No Cougar on the guidepost coming around this first 200.
They do. That's a long 12 laps, and actually, I'm from California, and what you saw earlier was called a California start. Not that it's called a California start in California, where they start around the curve and then just kind of filter the way in through the field instead of starting in lanes like you'll see in a sprint race rather. And our timer is not quite working as expected, but looks like they're going to be about 45 seconds in. So looks like it's working okay now. But yeah, it looks like no falls on the start, no major fights or anything. Pretty decent start so far.
Certainly, and it's a tight pack. I mean, I guess the seeds are no lie so far. I believe it's still Will Ratner in that first hole, and is with the seed of 2. So we'll see if he can keep up what's expected to be a good performance.
As their first lap is going to be in a 72-second first lap. That's pretty quick. You're expecting about a 70-second average for most of that field. But obviously, nerves cause you to get out fast in pretty much every race. As the pack is pretty together at this point.
400-meter dash in third place from Wesleyan, Kyron Roberts with a time of 50.92. Second place from Trinity, Kai Balin with a time of 50.28.
For our viewers who might be able to see the seeds, I might not take a ton of credence in it because I believe there has been some misseeding. Someone from Wesleyan is wearing the 8 sticker. Meanwhile, someone from Connecticut College is listed online as being the 8 seed. So we will try our best to guess who is in what position.
Wesleyan, and of course, Tufts University.
I believe that maybe Will Ratner, as you might have seen earlier in the 1500, I believe.
Runners coming through in 226 through 800, sticking on that low to mid 70s rhythm.
As you heard, 74-second second lap, so still slowing down a little more, getting back to their average pace.
A runner and a half. And just like the Trinity people, we've got some phenomenal hair.
As you might have heard from the PA announcer, there is a runner in a hat here. Perhaps one of the most famous 800-meter races of all time was with a runner coming from the back wearing a hat. We may see something like that today, but it looks like most of the runners are pretty comfortable at this point. They know they got about 10 laps left to go. No need to ruin a race here. as a couple Wesleyan runners are stuck off of the back.
I imagine this is typically what you see in 5,000 meter races. You know, early on you see enough space really for people to stretch their legs, but really not much more. Just trying to, you know, keep up with the group, making sure, you know, before the race is halfway old, you know, you still are kind of within striking distance.
Yeah. Another thing you see here is some mental math from the runners that they're definitely doing right now. As they come through the third in about 3:43, which is going to be about as I attempt to do math, about a 77-second lap. I'm getting roughly back to average pace. But something you're also going to see here is a little bit of movement here in the front of that pack. Going about 3 wide at its widest. But a Conn College versus Wesleyan battle going on here.
And as Cougar was mentioning with the pacing, I mean, really with that target time of 15 minutes, you really want to see yourself, you know, pacing it around what seems to be 80 seconds. I mean, it seems like they're going out a little bit hotter than that, which is good for as long as it lasts. But as we said, you know, nerves, and just the greater energy definitely makes you race a little bit faster at the start of these events.
As you see that mile, I bet about 4:55 for that first mile there, which is going to be a roughly 72-second lap.
And it looks like we have Will Ratner still in the lead.
Taking the lead for Wesleyan, followed by the duo Connecticut College runners. You may remember Ethan Milzark powering through that second
as we see a Wesleyan runner taking the lead here.
Coming back for the distance double.
Yeah, during the 5K, for some of these runners, if you think you're going to win, it's a matter of when do you feel like going hard here. You could see a runner try to break the field. I don't know if that's necessarily what he's trying to do. He could just be time trialing for a certain time and knows that he has to pick it up if he wants to keep pace. As we're going to see if the rest of the pack can try and maintain pace to stay with him, which it looks like they're going to be able to do. I don't see him creating too big of a lead yet.
We have basically two groups forming. The lead pack of 6 runners led by Miles Arano, and then the second crew, within which it looks like our capped runner, whose name I'd love to tell you, is leading that group.
5K debut for the Jumbos. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Michael Kennedy, senior from Tufts University.
Quite a strong run so far by Arano. I mean, to me, it seems like he's, you know, going at what kind of looks like 3,200 meter pace, but seemingly being able to hold this up pretty well.
Yeah, you're certainly looking at 2 main packs forming here, with the main pack of at 5, the trailing runner, followed by another pack of 5. Probably, I assume that second pack is going for the roughly 16-minute range in the first one. We're going to see how far under 16 minutes they're trying to go for.
Certainly. Do you think Miles will be able to start lapping some runners at some point? Will there be enough time here?
I think that's possible. There's only about a 150, maybe 200 meter distance between the last runner currently and the first pack of the race. And given that we are only like halfway through the current race, I think it's definitely possible we get some lap runners toward the end. I know I definitely got lapped, in some races in high school. As we can see, that pack of 4 now is currently still pretty close together.
So it's Ratner, Aronon, and Milsark or Verstandig. I believe the other Connecticut College runner, the other one, has dropped out of the race.
Zoom flies on.
And
as you might have heard, the current top runner has some Zuma flies, which are you might have heard rather that they take off about 4% of your race, and 4% of we'll say about a 15-minute run is still going to be about 40 seconds or somewhere in the 30-second range, which is pretty significant for a race. If you could take 30, 40 seconds off your PR pretty much immediately just by wearing a different shoe, I think I'd wear them.
Grinding to break that 16-minute barrier.
And it's always an interesting calculus figuring out which shoes to wear, especially for a race this long. I mean, you're still early on in the season, so perhaps you figure you're doing your legs better favors by wearing flats. But it looks like it's somewhat hard to tell from here, but it looks like you definitely see some people in spikes just really going for the win by trying to get a little more speed.
About 9:10, so they're well on pace for that.
Yeah, I think I'd personally wear spikes for the 5K, but California, at least for cross country, did not allow a lot of spikes to be worn, so I did end up wearing a lot of flats personally. But we will get you that 2 mile once they cross it, that 2 mile mark, because we could see a runner lapped here, as there's only about a less than 100-meter difference between the last runner and the pack of 4 that is currently winning. We also saw a leadership change, still to another Wesleyan runner, but we're going to see how that pack develops later on.
I believe that's Ratner.
So we saw a roughly 9:50 2 mile time. So we are speeding up past that first mile, given that the first one was about a 4:55 and our second one was about a roughly the same pace. Excuse me.
And the just body language I'm seeing from Aronoff suggests he might be kind of running out of some steam with his head bobbing and just generally kind of slowing up, getting strung out from this group. Meanwhile, Ratner's looking strong along with the other two runners. And don't be confused. The runner they're about to be passing is I believe currently in last place. So it was not too bold of a prediction, I guess, to say that there would be some lapping going on in this race.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be our only lap. I don't think we're going to get 2 lapped runners here, but we do see the pack starting to string out, actually. Perhaps some of our first early movement in the race. As you can see, our Conn College runner taking more of a lead here as a teammates cheering him on.
Certainly, and I guess you could argue that these times that were put forth by the coaches were not. Maybe they won't be super accurate to the final times in one direction or the other, but are very indicative of just their skill. With one of the top seeded times was Christopher Standig, who was certainly following through on those expectations, followed by Will Ratner, and Aronoff's doing all right, hanging in there, not losing a ton of ground with his teammate looking back to him.
Less than a mile to go in the 5,000-meter race.
As we have less than a mile here, I remember part of the 5K strategy for some of these races was just to start pushing hard that last mile with whatever I had left, which was usually not a lot. But we're going to see if the Conn College runner can create as big of a break as he wants. Look like now it's only about 25 meters. And if I was a Wesleyan runner here, one of the either in second or third place, I would probably try and work with my teammate here to try and get us to speed up and catch the Trinity College runner, given that it's significantly easier to run with someone else and try and catch someone.
Blue iPhone. If you find a blue iPhone, please bring it to the press box. A missing blue iPhone.
And
Thank
you get to the stage of the race, and you almost have a hard time remembering who is part of the crew that's really just got 3 laps left versus the group that is being lapped. But it's pretty clear to say our strong runner right now, Christopher Standig, is doing quite well.
Don't count out Will Ratner and Miles Aronoff as they position themselves for the final 800 meters of the 5,000-meter race.
And as our PA announcer just mentioned, we are down to 800 meters, so it's going to have to be a 2-minute 800 meter in order to break 15, which in normal times is difficult for people who normally run the 800 is difficult. So I think we'll have to put that one to the side for now.
But I think we could see something in the 1520s for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But it'll be a race to the finish.
If you've not yet checked in for the 4x400 meter relay on the infield, please do so now. And the men's 10K will now be also checking in on the infield.
As we have 600 meters to go here, still have about a 30 or 40 meter lead for the runners for Conn College here.
Verstandig doing quite well, about to, I think, lap our next pair of runners here. And showing no signs of slowing, which is great to see. I mean, that's the only fear really at this stage for Verstandig. He's not really gonna get out kicked on this last lap by Ratner, and I think Ratner maybe just hears the footsteps and is trying to make sure he holds on to this second spot against his teammate.
Here we have 400 meters, which usually means start kicking, as you can hear the bell laugh going on.
In second place from Trinity, Robert Allen with a time of 22:24. And I'm excited to announce a new freshman record in the 200 meters through Tufts University's Luke Botsford with a time of 21:92. Congratulations, Luke Botsford, on the freshman 200 meter record.
As you might have been able to hear through the PA system, Luke Botsford has a freshman record for Tufts with a 21:92 in the 200 meter. But here,
looking like it's going to be a massive PR for Chris Verstandig of Connecticut College.
we're going to have a pretty significant victory potentially, unless something happens last 200, but I don't see anything. In this last 200, there's going to be a significant PR for this Conn College runner.
So I think your prediction is pretty much spot on, Cougar, from a couple laps ago. 15:20 is, I think, more or less what he's going to hit. I'd say maybe 15:25. But I guess the battle of note is Ratner. Oh, it looks like Ratner is kind of fallen off. Meanwhile, Aronow has come back strong, given a nice kick to the finish here.
Alongside the rest of the Wesleyan crew.
And solid finishes by the Cardinals here in this race. A slew of them coming at the end here.
Oh, and we got one last Tufts runner here trying to break 16. 51, 52. Oh, it's going to be close. 53, 54, 55, 56. Oh, it's going to be close. And he just gets it. 15, 59, breaks 16 minutes. That's got to be a PR right there.
Good stuff from Oliver, the first Tufts runner to come over the line, the sophomore from Glastonbury, Connecticut. Nice work by him. And we get consecutive Tufts runners here.
A 16:21, I believe, or 22, and a 16:26.
Michael Kennedy finishing out at 16:26.
With 2 runners left on the track in the men's 5K.
We will be wrapping up this event here soon and moving on to the much anticipated 4x4 next.
I'm very excited for this 4x4.
And it was certainly a well-contested race. Saw a bunch of lead changes, and ultimately more position changes, because the lead was quite clear from about halfway through the race with our Connecticut College runner, Chris Verstandig, finishing first.
From Tufts University, Harry Reinecker found with a height of 1.95 meters. Congratulations, Harry.
And then here we have some high jump scores to report.
We also have
we have Harry Reinecker found, the freshman from Tufts with a freshman record, 1.59 meters. Joshua Tai from Trinity with also 1.95 meters. And then Noah Olson in third from Wesleyan at 1.85, and Ben Stein from Tufts at 1.8. And that was the high jump. And tune in a few minutes to watch the one of the more anticipated races of the day, the Tufts versus Trinity versus Wesleyan 4x4.
Should be a good one. We always like to see these relays, as we've mentioned before, just as far as some, the closest we get to team-on-team competition, and it's another one where Tufts is in a good position to excel. Although the jury's still out about whether Alex Lemieux will be able to run in this race, given that he pulled up lame after a really raucous start in the 200 meter. We'll see if he has the legs to allow him to run the 4x4, or if maybe there will be a substitute for him.
It will be interesting, actually. Yeah, the 400 at the end of the day, the 4x4, is likely one of the more difficult for athletes to recover from, given that you ran hard earlier, and then you have to often race again against other athletes in a pretty close competition. But it does provide a lot of entertainment for the fans. Given that we don't have a lot of fans here running or in person today in Bedford, or I guess technically we're in Somerville, I believe. It's going to be great to watch on who to potentially win. But I do think that Tufts will be able to potentially win here, assuming they don't mess up any handoffs, as they did in the 4x1.
4x400 meter relay with 3 teams from Tufts University.
Will be a
But who
treat to
knows?
see.
I did commentator curse one earlier.
And one from Trinity.
I believe in the 4x1, so we're going to see. I don't want to call my shot too early.
At least there is generally less pressure for the 4x4 on these handoffs, given that they're not competing within a matter of fractions of seconds, like in the 4x1. However, that's not to say the seat times aren't tight. The Tufts separated by the other Tufts group separated by Wesleyan are only apart by 4 seconds. So certainly, a bad toss or a bad handoff can be a deciding factor between teams that are close together in distance.
Yeah, it'll be definitely entertaining to watch who ends up taking it, as we do have a few minutes before the 4x4.
If anyone has found a blue iPhone, please bring it up to the press box. Thank you.
And unfortunately, with these meets, sometimes comes missing items. There was a blue iPhone announced to be missing in the bleachers here. So for all you fans at home, if you happen through the camera to spot where this phone might be, do mention it in the comments. So as we wait here, we can give a little score update to the meet, if there have been any updates recently. It looks like no, at least based on the website we're looking at. However, from the most recent update about, I want to say a half hour ago, Tufts, I believe, was up with somewhere in like the 90-point range, up by a solid amount over the next scoring team, which likely was Trinity. And we will see if, presumably with such few events left, Tufts probably will have this win in the bag. We'll see if maybe a Wesleyan win in the 4x4 will let them make up some ground.
As we do actually have an updated score for you. Tufts is currently winning 182.5. Compared to Trinity at 116, Wesleyan at 104.5, and Conn College at 57 points. So I don't believe there are any possible avenues to win. I think Tufts might have this one in the bag based on the number of events left, but I could be wrong. So if anything, this 4x4 could just be for pride. And I know everyone is going to be closely watching how this turns out. I certainly will be.
No doubt. I would imagine the slew of good results in the 5,000 meter might help if the standings, or excuse me, if the points haven't been updated for that event, might help Wesleyan get propelled over Trinity for that second spot. So certainly they're competing in this 4x4 only does them good as far as just racking up more points.
Certainly, and also within reference to the rest of the conference, you want to show, these teams obviously want to show the other teams they want to mean business. It's going to be close, especially for the rest of the season, to see who ends up taking it. But I'm certainly excited to see what happens here. Some of the runners are starting to get warmed up and on the track here.
Men's 4x4 on the track now. Seems like only 2 teams are racing.
Max, did you ever run in the 4x4?
No, and it's funny you ask, because the 4x4 was really, at my high school, it's just sort of treated as, the last event of the meet. Really, it was sort of open to anyone who wanted to run it. And, it kind of works in that way. As far as the distance goes, where, we didn't really have enough sprinters on our team who were super motivated to run in the event. So, you could even get some distance guys who wanted to get their sprinting legs under them, but still, kind of work that endurance a little bit by way of essentially like a track workout being put into the meet. So it was a nice opportunity for, some of the distance guys to, to try out what is obviously more of a sprint event.
Yeah, I know I certainly, at least senior year, got put into a bunch of 4x4 events. And they're off, actually.
The men's 4x4 is off. The first leg for Tufts University is
And
Joshua Kersley, freshman. And we got for Wesleyan, Kyron Roberts.
And looks like Wesleyan is picking up some steam here.
In the lead in the first 200, coming through in, seems like a 22 mid. Fast start.
Doing a good job here. Keeping the lead is Kyron Roberts. And but with some ground being made, we'll see what happens with this handoff. Again, it becomes pretty crucial with such a small lead.
Handing off to Aaron Foot of Wesleyan, and Aiden Lewis from
That handoff looked pretty clean to me. I didn't see any fouls called on that handoff. As we see Tufts as the breakaway point, you're going to see him cut in and get off pretty cleanly there. It's pretty important, especially if you're in that second lane, to make sure you can get into lane 1 pretty easily. Arguably cut in a little early. You have that entire 100-meter thing and, trying to take the hypotenuse of it all. But he got in pretty cleanly, and now he's in lane 1.
Aiden doing a good job of keeping up this, I want to say, 5-meter lead. We'll see what happens on this backstretch. Keeping it all right, but Wesleyan definitely narrowing the gap. Once again, we get a big handoff with such a small lead.
Ben Stein from Tufts University and Mason Martell from Wesleyan. This could be a close race.
And Stein certainly going to need to put in work to keep Wesleyan off.
As you can see here, the entire meet is watching what's going on right now in this 4x4. Everybody wants to see Tufts win, unless you're a Wesleyan athlete or from any of the other schools here today. But looks like we still have a pretty close race going in to this last curve here. As you're going to see that Wesleyan runner try and come alongside the Tufts runner, Ben Stein. But Ben Stein's opening up a pretty significant lead, but a 1/2 second lead into this final lap. As you're probably going to have your fastest runner here on this last lap.
This will be a fast last lap.
And
now Walker almost got caught in that earlier 400, but we're going to see how he does here.
And Walker did quite well in the race he appeared in earlier. We'll see if he can have a similar performance here, although it looks like the gap is widening even more, the gap that was starting to widen towards the end of that last leg. And this is really just the excitement of this 4x4, is you just get, there are battles within the battles with these different legs of the race, and it's no less the case here where you see Andre Campbell just absolutely powering Tufts towards what will end up being a pretty clear win.
Yeah, we're going to see if he can bring it home here. Walker's putting in his best effort here to try and beat him, but I'm not sure if he's going to do it as they're coming in 320 range. And he comes in for the win.
Quite the finish for Andre Campbell with a time of 3:25.
And that's Andre Campbell on that last leg for Tufts, getting the win there.
And at least according to the seeded times, overperformance for both of them by a couple of seconds. So nice to see, especially as these relay teams get used to working with each other early on in the season.
Yeah, certainly. Unless we have any more 4x4 heats coming up, I believe the 10K is going to be our next event coming up.
The absolute beast of an event that should see us sticking up here for perhaps the next 35 minutes or so.
Men's hammer throw in third place from Wesleyan, Conn with a distance of 33.51 meters. Second place, Dylan Daisy from Tufts with a distance of 36.58 meters. And first place, Ethan Wilkie from Trinity with a distance of 37.15.
Yes. Do you guys know who the runner, just not in uniform is?
Yeah, it's Sean McDonald.
Oh. Does he go to Tufts?
He's a coach.
Oh.
That means it's short for unattached. He's a Tufts coach. He's there for pacing purposes.
Gotcha, thanks.
I'm going to set the scene. I've been excited for the training.
Hell yeah. Please do. And so we, as quickly as that race ends, we start the 10,000 meter here with just four competitors and a pacer, something I was not familiar with. The man the man shown in black here is Tufts coach, Sean McDonald. The technical phrase is unattached. Him just running here to set the pace.
Coming off a smoking hot 14:37 from last week
And
at his home track.
And we see featured here Matt Carter, who had a pretty awesome 14:37 from the 5,000 last week.
And is looking to pace
And
this race,
we see
will be 15:10 pace through 5K. So we'll see.
As the PA announcers mentioned, so Sean's role here is just to set the pace, looking to go for 15:10 pace during this first 5,000 meters, and I'd be curious to know if he's wearing a watch, because for normal runners they're not supposed to, but being that he's meant to be setting the pace, perhaps it has a little more value for him to, and it looks like he is. So I'd be curious to know the debate around this, given that these runners are essentially in a second-hand way getting the pace set for them, but certainly less consequential when all of the runners are from the same school. Connecticut College will just be the only ones getting points for this race. And just like in the 5,000 meter, we kind of see the split group formation, where we have two of the Connecticut College runners up at the front, with Sean obviously with them,
Sean McDonald,
and two in the back.
Assistant coach for the Tufts women's track and field and cross country teams. However, he previously ran for Bowdoin College, where he was All-American in cross country. I
think the value only is even more obvious in having these pairs to run with, in the sense that you have your people to pace with. I mean, ultimately, when you're just running within the same school, then you may as well just run what's going to be the safest race, and ultimately by running with a pair, you're sort of pushed to be running faster.
As I think 5 runners out in the Midwest recently broke 30 minutes for the first time.
And as you may have just heard from the PA announcer, 30 minutes is sort of that target time. Obviously from a mental standpoint, but also to, perhaps qualify for Division III Nationals.
In third place, Owen Rogers from Wesleyan with a time of 15:36.
And
In second place, also from Wesleyan, Miles Arano with a time of 15:33.
we still see here.
And in first place, from Conn College with a time of 15:27.
Still see here the same groups that have been present really for these couple of minutes so far in this race. And once the seeds become a little bit clearer to me, I will read out to you all the athletes who in what positions the athletes are.
Yeah, you're definitely going to see all these athletes trying to break the 30-minute barrier today in the 10K, which looks like they definitely have the possibility to do. Perhaps a little unlikely, given that the lack of sub 15 times in the 5K might be a little unlikely. But their seeds are about 30 minutes and 30 seconds. So if we see a big PR here, then it's definitely possible. If not, just breaking the 31-minute barrier would be great for the either D3 Nationals or for making the NESCAT Championships.
And it looks like we have, sort of the positionings that you'd expect based on seeds. In the back, we have Joseph Walensky, Ricardo Gonzalez, and in the front, Matt Carter and Jeffrey Love. So I would expect these pairs will sort of stick together, presumably for most of that race, as I said too, for pacing purposes.
Yeah, obviously in a race as long as a 10K, staying with someone makes your race both just better overall in terms of general experience, but also just in terms of pacing, because you were able to lean on somebody else to help take over the pacing duties sometimes. As we were going through our first mile, I believe, in about 4:50, that's pretty quick for a 10K. Who knows if they're going to be able to keep that? To break 30, they only need about a 5:06 pace, so they're a little ahead of pace. But it's good to bank some time on early if they can.
Certainly. But, it's sort of been a common theme we've seen throughout these races, the pacing that kind of outpaces, if you will, that target time. So we'll just see, as is the case in all of these races, if they'll be able to keep up with that pace they've set. And it certainly helps to have this pacer of Sean McDonald here so far.
Yeah, certainly.
To work together in this grueling 6.2
Max, have you ever run a 10K before?
I have not. I haven't even run it out as a road race. I've certainly run 6.2 miles in long distance practices, but it certainly doesn't compare to the grind of trying to win the race, get a certain time, and it's certainly a challenge. I applaud for these runners out here today.
Certainly. I have run a 10K. Ran a couple, I believe. But nothing as quick as these guys. There's a definite speed difference between my times and their times. But it's a long, grueling one. There's a lot of time where you're just running and you're just focusing on the pain, or rather, I guess, trying not to focus on the pain would be a better descriptor. But it will be it's going to be a long one in terms of the race distance. In terms of strategy, some things you might see here. Obviously, they're going to group together, but you could see a couple quick miles for miles 1 and 2, as we have somewhere in the 19 to 20 lap range left.
And it would be, quite, to say the least, quite impressive if there were people to break 30 minutes. It looks like in the 2019 Division III Outdoor Championships, the last time the D3 Championships were held, there was no one who broke 30 minutes. The top time was 30:14. So if they could break 30 minutes here, we'd be seeing some electric stuff, really at a national level.
Yeah, we do believe that first runner is going to be a pacer. Not an actual entrant in the race. Pacer, of course, if you don't know, is someone who helps keep the pace, as the name might suggest, by running at a certain pace or a certain speed to make sure they are on time for what their goals are for the race.
And that is something important to recognize too. That the times today will come with a bit of a grain of salt, given that there is the pacer. However, being able to rattle off a good time and get that confidence early on in the season definitely bodes well as far as just building off that effort, getting into championship season.
Yeah, and as we are on our second mile here, we're going to see if they can keep this kind of speed. They're definitely running hard, I got to say. It's a little strange, perhaps. Well, I guess not strange, but you'd expect them to perhaps be in a line, conserve energy, Elliot Kipchoge style. Although we don't quite have a car to help us break some of the air resistance that you normally get there. But it's certainly impressive that they're able to keep the speed. I do wonder how long they're going to keep the speed for, as we might see our first lapping here. Max, if you had an over-under on how many times someone's going to get lapped in this race, are you putting it somewhere in the 2-3 range?
I think it'll be 2. Yeah, I think it'll be 2. The back 2 Connecticut college runners are definitely holding their own, and I think we didn't see a lapping until around this time in the 5,000 meter. So, I think it'll probably be 2.
Strong trio that made cross-country nationals back in the day.
And I wonder, looking ahead for the jumbos, if they will enter some of their runners into the 10,000 meter at some point. I'm not really sure kind of what history looks like for their runners in this event, but it'd be curious to me, because obviously it'd be great, just pure endurance practice, especially in these lower stakes meets.
Yeah, I think there's a certain wisdom within collegiate track and field that you don't want to run too many 10Ks too early in the season. At least for cross country, the 10K is often only run in the championship kind of season. Before that, you typically run 8Ks, so only about 5 miles, instead of the 6.2 over the 10K. So I think the Jumbos could be preserving their 10K runners to make sure they don't overexert themselves. If you're running a 10K every week or every other week, that's a lot of damage you're doing to your body. And saving that energy for the championships may be a smart decision that could play well for the Jumbos down in either D3 Nationals or later on in NESCAC meets.
In first place, Tufts University with a time of 3:25:31, and in second place,
so
Wesleyan with a time
it looks
of
like
3:26:99.
it looks like we've had our first lapping of the afternoon.
Updated scores are
And our second about to come.
in 2:15:50.
And through it seems like 9 laps, I want to say. A little over 2 miles. We have the runners coming in at just under 11 minutes, 10:58. Seems like pretty good pace so far. Wish I could do the math in my head, but
I think it's somewhere in the 9:40 to 9:50 range for the 2 mile.
yeah, sounds about right.
But we're going to see if the runners can keep this pace. They're still hanging on to the rabbit, which I think is probably a great sign to see for them. I know I'd never rabbited a race, but every once in a while I had a high school coach who would step in on practice reps, and it was always very nice to have someone to chase after instead of trying to set the pace yourself.
No doubt, and I noticed I was commenting this earlier, Cougar, that I noticed that the rabbit, Sean McDonald, is wearing a watch, to set the pace. But it seems like the other runners are wearing watches, and perhaps it's because this is, if you will, an uncontested race being run only by Connecticut college runners. It's really just for their own. I don't even know if they would technically get seat time, but
is missing a wrist heart rate monitor, it appears to be a Whoop or something similar. If you're missing one, we have.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on what the rules of wearing a watch in the college races are, but I assume that they are less than fully allowed. But there are a lot of potential watches you can use in running. Including there's the Garmin, the classic, that give a lot of different tools. Heart rate monitors, step counts, pace your current pace, obviously. That can definitely help your running, but most of which aren't necessarily allowed in a race, as it might provide an unnecessary advantage that you wouldn't get, that wouldn't be potentially allowed for other competitors.
Javelin, it was always a fun exercise during track workouts with some of the more experienced and just, I guess, more aware of their own pacing runners. That they would be able to guess their time after certain reps, and it was pretty impressive how it was usually within 1 or 2 seconds. And I, especially as a more inexperienced runner, I was kind of shook by that accuracy.
As we see, the pace are peeling off finally, so the real racing will now begin between the two Connecticut College runners today. I presume they're going to be the people who will actually potentially have a chance of winning this. But it'll be interesting to see which one of them will win this. I don't necessarily have any real bets between Jeffrey Love and Matt Carter, but I think the runner who's currently winning is who I would put my money on most likely. Although one of the more entertaining parts of college sports is arguably some of the games. I'm not sure is the correct terminology here, but ways to pass time during a track meet. Since track meets are long, and sometimes you might have an event at the beginning and end, so finding fun ways to try and win. Try and have fun, such as like guessing who's going to win a race before they actually win it. As we come through or as we are soon to come through the 5K mark, I believe in a minute or two. Or not in a minute or two, in a few seconds, as they hit the other side of the field. It's going to be roughly 15-minute and 13 seconds and 14-second respectively, halfway mark. So if they're going for 30-30, they're right on pace. But if they're trying to break that, especially without a pacer, I wouldn't be as confident.
We'll see what they can do. And by way of prediction, Cougar, I mean, it's interesting also just to look at history and how these runners are. I mean, it seems like from what I can tell, Jeffrey Love, who is leading right now, coincidentally, tends to do a little bit better in these longer distances. So his PR, while his PR in the 5,000 is a not too shabby 15:11, his PR in the 8,000 from cross country is 24:59. Meanwhile, Matt Carter registered his 5,000 PR in 14:38. Last week, meanwhile, his 8,000 PR is 26:32, about 2.5 minutes slower than Jeffrey Love. So it comes as no surprise that in this even longer distance, Jeffrey seems to be the stronger runner at this point.
Yeah.
Or if he's in it for the long run, but this duo is putting in some impressive work as they are just over halfway.
You do see a little 1 second gap between the two. I wonder if that's going to increase over time, or if they're going to be able to stick together. Probably sticking together is going to be good for the both of them. We do see a little change in the back of the pack, actually. Formerly it was, apologies, I don't know which Connecticut College runner is who.
It looks like Ricardo Gonzalez is now in the lead, in the third place spot, having jumped his teammate Joseph Waluski.
But there's a certain difference in passing a teammate versus passing a random runner that you don't necessarily get. When you pass your teammate, I think there's a certain level of competition between you, and it's hard to accept that you're getting beat by maybe one of your friends on the team. But you do see a wider gap actually occurring between Ricardo Gonzalez and Joseph Waluski.
And impressively enough for our two leaders in Jeffrey Love and Matt Carty, they're both sophomores, so we could see them really being at the top of this 10,000 runner group in the NESCAC for a couple of years to come.
Yeah, there aren't that many runners who run the 10K compared to, say, the 1500 or the 800. It's one of those events that it's hard to rope people in because a lot of people don't want to run hard for 6.2 miles, and I think understandably that, especially when you're just doing 25 laps around a track, as we have about 10 more for the leaders.
I must say it is an impressive feat, though. I mean, being able to go this distance, regardless of, whether you're in first or last. I mean, it's there's no sugarcoating 25 laps around a circle. So it's good work that these four are putting in right now.
Yeah, one of the more amusing parts about track is the cheering. Especially in the longer races. In high school, I only raced about 8 laps, so nothing compared to the 25.
A measly 8 laps.
But when you're getting cheered on by your teammates, there's only so much cheering you can do on the 20th lap, where you're like, "Oh, keep going."
That's Matt Carter. And Jeffrey Love.
It does wear on you a little bit. I think as a runner too, you probably just block out. As much as it might be nice, you probably just block out to some extent the cheers, knowing I've heard this many times before, and I think I need to be the one motivating myself at this point because we are so far along.
Yeah, we would like to announce the men's triple jump, which I don't believe we've done yet. So in first, from Tufts, competing unattached, we have Julian Hubbard with a 13.86. With, interesting enough, only one successful jump, but that successful jump got him. Reed Corliss with a 12.82, nearly edging out Kennard Hughes from Trinity. Both of those names you might have heard in the earlier jump events. And then in fourth place, you have Alex Sliska with a 12.53 meters, all with a wind of anywhere from 2.1 to 3.1 or 3.4. As our top two runners are still sticking together while the gap continues to move between the 3 and 4.
And we're about 3,000 meters left in this race, with the positions basically holding as they have been for this entire race. I wonder if in fields that are a little bit larger and maybe more competitive in championship settings, if you see some more bunching up in a 10,000 meter race. Obviously, the likelihood is less given that it is so long and that people just get separated from a pure energy standpoint.
Yeah, I think getting separated as we have 2 miles to go here, the danger of getting separated is significantly higher, and the effects of getting separated are significantly higher in a longer race like this. So the runners typically tend to bunch together a little more and try to stay together. We can also read you the men's pole vault results, as Christopher Koskinen from Connecticut College wins with a 4.5 meter jump, or 14 feet and 9 inches. Hunter Farrell from Tufts and Liam Garrison, also from Tufts, coming in second and third in 4.35 meters and 4.05 meters. And Jackson Hemphill from Tufts coming in fourth place with a 3.75 meters.
Please come get us at the press box.
But there are definitely some good results for Tufts in the field section, which I think help lead them to victory. Given the amount of events scored. Sometimes with these events, it is more difficult to win an event or win a series of events rather than a singular event. Obviously, it's tough for the athletes as they have 7 more laps to go. But you do see a gap occurring for perhaps the first time in this race between the two runners. It looks like Matt Carter is now taking the lead.
Oh yeah, quite the gap forming now.
Probably about a 10-meter gap, which keeps expanding We're going to see if Love is able to keep on here and stay on the pack. His pack of one, at least. But we may see a second lapping here also occurring.
And unfortunately, we've lost the clock here, so not really sure how things are going as far as pace, but presumably someone is keeping this time, so the results will become available at some point after the race, that is.
We will tell you exactly what time is occurring as soon as we find out. But we do know that Matt Carter here is expanding his lead. Looks like Jeffrey Love is going to have to work a little harder to catch up, as most of the fans appear to have left the field here.
And these runners with just 6 laps to go, a mere 1.5 miles left out of this slog of a race. I gotta say I'm a bit surprised just from what history indicated about Love being, presumably the stronger ultra long distance runner. But after Carter's pretty impressive 5,000 meter last week, perhaps he's just building off that momentum.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about who's fresher in some of these races. Sometimes it is easier to translate the 5K speed up to a longer distance than it is to go from anything above a 10K down to a 10K. But you do see that gap opening up as we have about 5 or 6 laps left to go. As these Conn College runners cheer on their teammates, you love to see that kind of teamwork and cheering on. I think that's one of the better parts about track and field. So we have 5 laps left to go for the leaders.
And interestingly enough, in their dual meet last week, it looks like Connecticut College and Tufts did not run a 10,000 meters. So perhaps this is the first 10K action they're getting of the year. So again, part of just the randomness of this year is that it's been quite some time, if not maybe the first time ever, that these two just sophomores are running in a 10,000 meter. So perhaps that could just play a role in the unpredictability of it.
Certainly. At least I don't think there were any 10,000 meter runners before this point in the NESCAC season. So even if you get last in this race, you still get to be a NESCAC top 4 runner, which I'm sure they will take some kind of solace in.
And 30 seconds. In the final stages of the 10K race.
But I believe this is going to be the last mile coming up in the 10K. I always remember that when I was running 10Ks, I would feel absolutely horrible and then regret running any of the races.
Absolutely. I cannot say I've run over 10K at any one time very often in my life. So it's all of my respect goes out to these guys. And I can give you all a rough time update with how the runners are doing. I believe we're at around 26 minutes in. We're at 26:20 here. As we get to for our leader here with about 2.5 laps left.
Yeah. So 26:20 is going to be about. That's going to be about a 5:15 pace, which would be a little too slow for breaking 30. But approximating that pace to finish, that would be about a 32-minute time, which wouldn't be bad or anything. That'd be a pretty great race. But they're definitely putting in the work here.
Matt Carter just over the 27-minute mark as he chases that national standard.
So we got 3 60-minute. Kenny, you can do it. 4-minute mile pace, no problem.
Just an easy 4-minute mile, no biggie.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think realistically, he could have 31 in his sights. Or no. Probably 30-30
Yeah,
around
somewhere
there.
in that range.
Hard to say. Hard to know he's going to hold up. But looking strong so far. So no reason to suggest he won't be able to keep this up. And you definitely see the energy picking up on the sidelines as Matt comes down and finishes out these couple of laps. His teammates definitely urging him on to, to finish strong here.
That's Carter winding up for 800 to go as he pulls ahead.
Just to be a little cynic about that, that could also be some of the teammates wanting them to go home a little faster. But yeah, you definitely obviously want your teammates to run as fast as they can. With 800 meters left to go, I'm sure they want to finish as bad as anyone else does here. I'm sure they're feeling it here. 10K is a large distance to run, especially at a pace as fast as these guys are running.
Certainly. I mean, you can tell even in just the effort they're showing that they're not walking into this finish line. Like they're really trying to get a PR, trying to establish themselves as top 10K NESCAC runners. And just as by way of time check, we are at 29 minutes. So Matt Carter definitely in a position to get around right, to get around that 30-30 range.
But here, yeah, it looks like you might hear the bell in a minute, which should signal that it's their last lap.
Exciting stuff. You feel like you really earned it after having run 24 before.
And there he goes. He's starting to kick here. You could definitely see him put in a higher gear here.
Bell left for Matt Carter.
Jeffrey Love
Looks like he's
about
winding up.
300 meters behind him, looking to close strong into his last lap.
To set the stage, Matt ran an impressive 14:37 5K last weekend at Connecticut College. Let's see what he can do over 10,000 meters.
And Matt Carter heading out into his final 200, looking quite strong, definitely in kicking form.
Ooh, that is a definite kick. You can see him beating the other Conn College runner. So he's going to lap him again.
And it's looking like he's at about 33:20. Can he break 30:30? And he will.
That's a 30:35.
30:30?
Unofficially,
30:35.
Matthew Carter.
That's pretty fast.
Pretty good.
Right
Yeah.
on target.
That's a lot faster than I
with
could
his
run.
seat time. According to T-First, he does not have a 10K time, so quite the time for a debut.
I think that might be a PR there,
At the National Championship meet in May.
which is going to be it's going to be a fun season for him, I'm sure, as the other Connecticut College runner here is about to finish, Jeffrey Love,
So
bringing it in strong.
Matt Carter's time would have had him finishing 7th in the 10K at Nationals.
31:50.
Obviously with the help of a pacer, but still nonetheless impressive. Definitely puts him in a position to at least be able to qualify, I would hope.
also believe that should be his debut since he missed his freshman outdoor track season due to COVID-19.
So great electric stuff really in this inaugural or in this debut 10,000 kilometer race by Love and Carter.
It's hard to say how much these runners wanted to be in a 10K again, as masochistic as that might seem. But I'm sure they're happy with what I presume are their new PRs in the 10K.
No doubt. It's kind of a Hobson's choice. Do you want to, improve on your time and put yourself in an even better position to qualify for nationals, or do you want to put yourself really through that punishment again? But maybe they like it, like you said, in a masochistic way.
Wesleyan.
That's fair.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you, this is Sam, and for those celebrating Patriots Day tomorrow, have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
As we have, looks like what I believe might be the final lap for Joseph Wolowiski.
See Ricardo Gonzalez finishing up his second to last lap here. So I must say, I think this first broadcast in quite a while of JumboCast Track went pretty well, don't you think?
I think so, yeah. It's been, what, 5 or 6 years since the last one?
I believe so.
Well, it's great to be back for sure. I know I personally wanted us to cover a track meet, so I'm glad it's finally happening. But it has been a pleasure to be with you all today for today's track meet. I hope you enjoyed our coverage, some of our graphics, and of course some of the racing and jumping and throwing and pole vaulting that you had the pleasure of seeing today, despite all of the restrictions that led us here today.
No doubt. Certainly, I would imagine in terms of pure time, one of the longest broadcasts we've had.
Yeah.
It would take some pretty crazy extra inning game for baseball or softball to match it. So it's good getting some quality time up in the booth here with you, Cougar, I must say.
Yeah, it's been about, we are almost at the 4-hour mark. Going to be a little short by the end of the meet. But looks like we have a Connecticut College runner finishing. I believe that's Joseph Wolowiski.
We shall see.
Maybe? Is he finishing?
Yeah, it looks
Nope.
like he's got one left.
One left.
So let's hope he can finish strong. Looks like he's getting that kick in.
I think one of the things I like about distance races that you don't necessarily get in some of the sprints is the presence of a real kick, where you could see a definite change in between a runner's form and obviously their speed to make sure they run the fastest race they can. And you could definitely see him kicking here as he puts on more effort towards the backstretch.
No doubt, and I'm sure for a lot of these distance runners in such long races, they might crave at times being able to just bust out a full-on sprint. So at least that last lap kind of affords them the opportunity to do so.
Certainly. I know my kick was always my pride and joy of my running career. Not that it was particularly fast or anything, but I don't think I got out-kicked for a number of years. Granted that that might have just been for slower races, but you got to take the victories where you can get them. As we
Absolutely.
have.
Look, we all have our strengths and specialties, and if your kick is it means you're finishing off the race better than you expect.
And here we have the finish. And he sprints it in as this team celebrates him finishing.
A nice, good finish by Ricardo Gonzalez, finishing third in this race.
As we have one more runner on the track, which I believe is Ricardo Gonzalez.
Wolowiski finishing out. Last 150 here.
I don't exactly know what lap he's on. This might be his last one.
And you see the grouping of Connecticut College runners cheering him on from behind the finish line. And it looks like he's got one more after this. Perhaps.
And
that's
done.
That's it. And we conclude here with not only the 10,000 meter, but our meet at large. So on behalf of Cougar Hansen and myself, Max Goldfarb, we thank you for joining us today in whatever capacity you did. And we look forward to having you all back on our stream for our next track meet coming up in a couple of weeks.
Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Have a wonderful day and have a great Patriots Day tomorrow.